Welcome to episode 6 of Wrist Time Podcast. On today's episode, Dave and I are joined by the refounder of Fear's watch company, Nicholas Bowman-Scargill. So sit down, relax, grab yourself a drink, and enjoy the podcast. Episode 6. We're joined by Nicholas Bowman-Scargill.
Bowman-Scargill, yes. I'm one of only 2 Bowman-Scargills in the entire world.
What?
I created my husband and I created the name in 2011 when we civil partnered. I was Scargill, he was Bowman. We're both too stubborn, so we just put the two together.
That's awesome.
I know. It's brilliant. I always threaten that one year as a anniversary gift, I'll give him a trademark of our surname.
Oh man, so it's good to have you up. You're up for our next Red Bar Glasgow event.
Yeah, I'm looking forward to it.
Have you done many Red Bars?
I've done a couple in London, but not regularly, no.
Yeah.
But I was thinking as I was on the train today, I think I last came to Glasgow, I was a teenager, so I would have been during uni, so about 2006, 2007. I had some good friends from school who were at university here.
It's changed a bit.
Yeah, this is what everyone keeps saying to me. But I had a great time. I remember really, and driving through the city earlier, I was like, yeah, it's really nice to be here. I'm looking forward to exploring more tomorrow.
That's good. Have you got anything planned? Are you getting anywhere you want to see? Or?
So I'm hoping to see a couple of people, but also just have a nice explore. But yeah, one of the people I'm trying to arrange to see is your local watch company.
Anordane. Yeah.
Thank you. Yes, a good dyslexic. I can never pronounce it. But yeah, I've spoken to them quite a bit, and I'm loving what they're doing. Those beautiful dials. So
they're doing some like crazy stuff. They just kind of popped up out of nowhere.
Yeah.
But the dials are just phenomenal.
I was there on Monday.
Oh really?
I went round.
Brilliant.
To their studio. So
you met with Lewis?
Yeah, I met with Lewis and the team, and got to see the process. Got to see from start to finish. The dials are stunning.
Yeah,
they're really stunning. One, I never even noticed this. I saw this. Lewis came to our last event, our Grand Seiko event we did, and I never noticed it at the time. But when I was round there looking at the dial, where they've got the name placement is
at 9 o'clock, isn't it?
Yeah, but
and it looks like a baton.
I just thought it was a baton.
Yeah.
I thought that's genius. And if they were to keep it like that, and that was their thing,
yeah.
I think that'll be brilliant, and it just keeps the dial so clean.
I mean, I always think I like any watch where if you basically took the name off the dial, you still can guess what it is. Whether because of the hands, whether because of certain details on the dial. I think that shows good design. And I think with that, the fact that the logo, the name it's not irrelevant, but it's not right in the centre being that big thing shouting. I love it.
I've not seen it. I've never seen that before, but it's kind of the name's been hidden away so subtly.
Well, it's almost like the Cartier in the Roman numeral, but then of course it then says Cartier at the top. But I like those hidden things.
Yeah, if they took that away at the just under the 12 o'clock and left it at the bottom, that would almost be a wee bit more appealing to me. And I think for that reason, it's like. That's quite sly. I like it.
Yeah. It's that sort of hidden detail.
Clever. Someone's put thought into that. They've not just, like you said, slapped it on the front of the watch.
Did you see that pink dial they've done? I haven't yet seen that in the flesh.
No.
They've got this pink, which is when I've spoken to a lot of the watch journalists, they're all raving about this pink because it's almost a watery pink. It's a really unusual shade, and then the battens and the printing is much stronger in its colour. But I'm hopefully going to see them tomorrow and
you'll
have a little peruse of what to see. Yeah.
You'll have a lot.
Well, I know when Lewis and we planned to have a 10-minute phone call a few weeks ago, and an hour and a half later we were still chatting. I think it was only because my phone was running out of battery. I needed to.
He's a lovely guy.
Yeah.
He's very very cool guy to be around. You can feel the energy he's got for the brand when you're speaking to him. And when I was there, I was, I was expecting just, I don't know what I was expecting, but everyone was so, focused on what they were doing. Like,
they're true craftspeople, aren't they?
Yeah,
you know.
But then going and talking to them, they were equally as passionate about what they were doing to a complete stranger that they'd never met before. It's great. You'll have a lot of fun. It's nice, and the dials are something else.
Yeah.
But speaking of dials, your Brunswick is
stunning.
Yeah, and I didn't realize. I only read this today because I didn't want to look too much into it. Like you were talking about that earlier on, that Hodinkee article. I'm glad that I never read it before speaking to you. How are the dials made?
So they're cold resin enamel,
as
opposed to the ground fur enamel that Lewis is doing. But it's it's still an enameling process. It still means that about 30 to 40% of dials get rejected, which is expensive, and you know, it also means that you want to make a batch of 20 dials, you actually end up having to make 30, 40 dials, knowing that ones will go. But effectively, they start off with a plate which is made in Norfolk, and that has the feet put on and has certain bits cut out from under it for then going on the movement. Once that's done, that then goes over to Worcester, where a company then does the enameling, and the same company then also does the printing. But the printing isn't like normal printing. It's called UV printing. So it's very similar to the process of shellac nail varnish. You basically sort of put the printing on, but then you sort of then have to bake it under UV light. But it means that the effect you get is it looks more like the traditional hand-painted dials of old, rather than that overly glossy, it's got that much flatter sort of surface finish to it, which against a high polish of the enamel looks beautiful.
And was that a case of loads of testing, or like how did you get to that?
It's weird actually, because people have always asked me about the prototyping, and I mean, prototyping is outrageously expensive. I mean, the prototype of the Brunswick, I could have bought a very nice brand new Patek for what that cost to build, that one watch. But we didn't actually make that many changes after the prototype. I mean, nowadays you can do 3D modelling, and once you've got a CAD drawing, but also it's that thing of, if you're looking at designs, you can you imagine them? And I'm a big fan of what I call the paper watch. So because I do all the design work myself, once I start getting to the thing where I'm trying out different dials or different case sizes or things, what I'll do is I'll print out a 1:1 scale watch just out of my inkjet printer, put a little piece of cardboard, cut it out, put a piece of cardboard behind it, and then sellotape it to my wrist. And then I'll walk around the house for a day or 2 days with that on my wrist, and you just get a feel. Now, obviously, what you're looking at is a 2D item, not a 3D item. But it's then just using the imagination, just looking at it, going, right, well, this will be this much bigger, or this will look that different. But that really helps to get proportions right. But yeah, when it came to the prototype, we didn't change as much as you might think. I think it was a case, I still remember going to the workshop, because they were like, oh, we'll send it to you from, special delivery, and I was like, no, I'm going on a train, I'm coming to pick it up in person. And I still remember seeing it and thinking, God, what happens if this isn't good? Like, this is expensive. But also, I was picking it up on the Saturday, we were launching it on the Wednesday night, so I was like, if this isn't good,
bit of a risk.
we've got huge problems. But it was the moment seeing it was like, this is incredible, and it's so much better than I thought it would be. Now, we did subsequently make some changes, and they had to make quite a few production changes to make it easier to make. Still takes far too long to make a Brunswick, but, they had to make those changes. But it is, it wasn't actually a case of trying out loads of different dials, different colours. We really were lucky. We kind of hit it on the nail quite early on.
And why is it so expensive, prototyping? Why is that cost so high when creating a prototype?
So a big part of the cost in a watch, certainly in things like cases, dials, will be the tooling cost. Nowadays, the tooling cost can be as little as basically putting a file into a computer and pressing go. But it also can be, setting up jigs, making jigs to polish things in certain ways. So that, the prototype Brunswick, I mean, it looked amazing. But when you look at the finish compared to the production ones are on a different level.
Mm-hmm.
And that's because that one was effectively, it was sort of crudely milled out, and then all the shapes were then put on basically by hand. Yeah. Someone literally holding it and putting it through the polishing mop. And, whereas when it comes to doing the production ones, you have tooling to be able to, still doing it by hand, but you can get a better finish.
A lot faster, more efficient. Yeah.
Exactly. So, to polish the case on the prototype, I mean, that took weeks. Weeks and weeks just to try and get it right. And even though we were saying about actually dial design, so there's quite a funny story behind the dial of this. Originally, this was going to have a dial quite similar to the Redcliffe. So it was going to have battens, not numbers. And it was as I was designing it, my other half kept badgering me, saying, look, I know nothing about watches, but everyone saying how much they love the numerals on the old watches. Like, why don't you do one with numerals? And the Brunswick was only going to be a 14-piece run, 14 watches, one-off project. That was it. It wasn't going to become, the main watch in my catalogue as such. And so I was like, okay, fine, we'll do that. And then when it came, the biggest problem was coming to the sub-dial for the seconds. And with that, it's, well, do you have 60, I mean, in the end, 60, 10, 20, 30, or do you have just 60, 15, 30, 45? Do you have none? Do you have a ring? Do you not have a... And I must have come up with dozens and dozens and dozens of sub-dials. And I remember it was a Friday night, and I set up Fears from my house. So, I came out of my office, and I had my housemates who I was living with, and they had all got in like takeaway pizzas and stuff. And I go downstairs, and they're like, "Are you still working? It's like midnight." I'm like, "Yeah, I know, but I can't get this right." So in the end, one of them sort of drunkenly was like, "Well, just print them all off and bring them down, and we'll decide." And so I went up, hit print out like these 12 sheets of paper, came down, laid them all out. And it was amazing because I thought everyone was just going to take the piss and go like, "Oh, I like this one," drunkenly pointing at one. And it was amazing because everyone just was looking at them going like, "Oh, it's amazing. There are only slight differences, but they look really different." Yeah. And it's like when you first handled the watch just now, you immediately went to the sub-dial and it was really interesting, the feedback from them of what they did and they didn't like. I then incorporated into what eventually became the final one. And I think that's the thing. None of them are watch collectors. They're not watch people.
Yeah. I think that's always good, because I studied fine art, so it's that kind of contemporary stuff that you see on a wall and you don't really kind of understand it, for kind of the and kind of layman's terms. But when you try to explain what something means to to my mum or my dad, it kind of made things a bit simpler in my head, where you have to kind of really grind it down to the very basics of saying this is this because it means this, and then this in terms of aesthetic, this looks better, and then that doing it in that kind of more simplistic mindset kind of really was a massive benefit for me doing my course and whatever expression I've got. I'll put it in kind of really simple terms and just let it kind of come through completely visually with no kind of pre-made ideas of what something should look like as well. I think that's probably the same kind of process you went through with that. I think where you're just giving it to people who don't really know what they're looking at. It's purely aesthetic, and that would probably appeal to the kind of bigger mass market probably.
Well, if you think, I think it's something you guys have discussed before in a previous episode. It's, none of us actually need to be wearing a watch.
Yeah.
And I shouldn't be saying that as the managing director of a watch company, but it's true. And so you realise that actually it's about creating something that is beautiful and that people, either fall for or they love it. And for me, I've always gone on the basis, I'd rather someone loved my watch than like it. The one stat I'm particularly happy of, and I'm not a stat person, though I've got a degree in economics, I'm not a big one when it comes to numbers and all that. But in 2 years, in the hundreds of watches sold, not a single watch has ever been returned. For me, that is important, because that means someone's bought it because they love it, not because they like it. It's not it's all right. It's you want that thing where you go, actually, wow, this is... And actually, to get that, you need to be talking to people who know nothing about watches. You need to just talk, because people will know if something looks beautiful or not.
Who are buying them? Are they being bought for gifts for people, or are people buying them for their own collections?
It is a complete mix. Yeah. I thought they were going to be bought by just watch collectors. So the youngest owner of Brunswick is 24, and it is his first ever watch. So not his first proper, this is his first ever watch he's ever owned, and he bought one. And it was that bizarre thing where you're thinking, most people would start off with a Timex or a Swatch or something. No, you've just gone straight in for a hand-built one of 70, But the oldest owner is 85. And for him, he owns a few watches, but he loves engineering. And, he's of a generation which is, knew when Britain made everything. Yeah. And so that's important for him. It's a complete mix. Women as well as men. Some have been bought as gifts. Some have been bought, because people have just gone, I like it. Others have been bought as... Some people have told me they've bought it and they've just put it straight in the safe. Just say, I'll never wear it. I just know that, it's such a low-run production that actually, it will have value.
What's your thoughts on that then? How do you... Because obviously you've put all this work into something, refining so many different details with the hands, the dial, the leather straps that you've talking about. How do you feel with somebody? Just put it aside, just waiting for it to. Obviously, I think if it was me, I would like it to be worn and enjoyed how it's meant to be. But I guess kind of different people get different things from anything they buy, basically.
I mean, I suppose if I was, a cold-headed capitalist, I'd be like, well, I don't really care as long as you buy it, and the money's good. I don't care, but I do care. It's when you put so much into it. I think that's the thing of having restarted a family business. Yeah. If I'd just gone out and bought the trademark Fears, that'd be one thing. But the fact that, I'm the sixth generation, great-great-great-grandfather who started it, my title is fourth managing director, because there have only ever been four managing directors of Fears. Edwin Fear, Amos Daniel Fear, Amos Reginald Fear, and then the business closed. And Amos Reginald Fear, when he closed it in the 70s, he was my great-grandfather.
So how was the business started and why did it close?
So it started by Edwin Fear in 1846 over in Bristol. And at the time, he was a 22-year-old watchmaker. And he started a workshop, and it also had a small showroom as well. And they were doing clocks and watches, as well as making some of their own movements. Right from the beginning, they were also importing movements and then casing them up and making, amends to them and differences. But it then ran through the three generations. But what's quite interesting is seeing how the business changed. So that when the second generation took over and the end of the Victorian period, he was the real sort of firepower. He took it from being a Bristol watchmaker to being a national watchmaker, but also an international watchmaker. So the Brunswick is named after Brunswick Square. And Brunswick Square in Bristol is where, in 1920, they opened the export business, Fears Export Limited. By 1929, watches were being sent regularly to 95 countries around the world. And at that point, they were employing 100 watchmakers in Bristol. It was the west of England's largest watch manufacturer. It was a rival to the likes of Smiths. Mm-hmm. And when you look at it, if you go on eBay today and you want to buy a vintage Fears watch, good luck. I'm always keep my eye on them. But if you look at where they're being sold, it's all around the world. Yeah. I've got watches in the archive that I've brought back from India, Dubai, Canada, the US, Australia. So, they were a real international firm. And actually what's been very interesting is since restarting Fears, people have got in contact saying, I've got my grandfather's watch. And they're also all around the world. It's fascinating finding out the stories. One guy in the Falkland Islands, there's one store called Falklands General Stores, which sold cameras and watches. It sold the sort of high-end technical things in the 50s and 60s. And that's where his father bought this Fears diving watch back then. Until he sent that email, I never knew Fears had made a diving watch. So that was fascinating.
Cool. Yeah. And so how did they come about closing in the end?
So it's sort of like the story of most businesses of that period. Family businesses today, if they were to close, they wouldn't really close. You would merge it, you would sell it, you would take it public. But back then, if your family name was above the door and it wasn't a family member running it, you closed it. It's a bizarre... Okay. We live in a completely different sort of post-Big Bang, post, 80s Thatcher Britain, where actually you look at it and go, why would you ever do that? But back then it was a case of, no, the fourth generation not wanting to continue it.
Yeah.
So you start winding it up. Now, in a way, that's a huge blessing. Because I wouldn't be here talking about Fears if it had kept going.
Yeah.
Because it would have obviously merged with someone eventually, maybe Smith's or someone. By the 90s, it would have been just a trademark.
It would have been swallowed up.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Exactly. And so the fact that it closed and everything lapsed meant that when I turned up, I could reincorporate, I could re-trademark. Everything was just dormant. So...
And how did that come about? So this rebirth of the brand, how did this happen?
So this is the most bizarre story. So I was about 2.5 years into my apprenticeship at Rolex in London, and I was enjoying the job, but I've probably always had that itch to one day go out there and do my own thing. But I just never either had the confidence or the inspiration of what to do. And I was saying this to my parents and saying, look, I was saying to you guys earlier, I did a degree in economics, then I was in public relations, and then I went to Rolex. So I was like, I've already done, quite a major career change once. I don't know what I'd want to do, but one day I'd like to do my own thing. And this was over a Sunday lunch back home. And my mum sort of jokingly was like, well, why don't you restart the family watch company? I was like, well, what family watch company? Now, I'd known that Edwin Fear was a watchmaker. Yeah. I knew that his son was, and I knew that my great-grandfather, my mum's grandfather, had been a watchmaker. But I'd assumed that they were like the watchmaker. We all know a watchmaker who's a guy on his own. He does a bit of servicing. Sort of the traditional version of the guy at Timpson's, that sort of thing. What no one had ever explained to me was that they were also managing directors of this huge operation, this huge firm. And so she went and found an old photo album and found some old adverts, and there were no watches though, but she was like, oh yeah, look, I think we've got some old paperwork, and suddenly holding an advert from 1946, so when they celebrated their centenary, showing the watches they used to make. You're looking at this thinking, right, if you need a light bulb moment, there's every light bulb going is turned on at this point. And that train journey back home to London from my parents, I was like, right, I need to do this. And I think that Sunday night, I first went on eBay, I first went on Google, find out any information. Yeah. And then start the most enjoyable Google search you can ever do. How to set up a watch company. I mean, it's literally as naive as that. I look back on it now and I think, what the hell was I doing? But of course, even though I worked in the industry, I worked for Rolex. Yeah. That didn't give me any idea about where to start finding suppliers or designers or how to market it or any of that. Yeah.
What was the biggest challenge? So having that initial idea going to what you're wearing on your wrist, what was the biggest thing or the biggest thing you had to overcome to get to that?
That's really difficult actually, because I'm sat here tonight and I'm thinking the challenges over the next few weeks, the next few months, the challenges of what I've got to sort out tomorrow.
Your challenge of understanding 30 Scottish guys drinking.
I'm going to be totally lost.
Your biggest challenge.
Which one of you is going to be my translator?
I can barely understand the crowd of them. I don't know.
But I start looking backwards, and things that back then were really scary and really unsure, I now take for granted. Lots of it are the nitty gritty of running a business. But actually, I think back then was just how do you build a watch? Like how do you go around building a watch? So bear in mind, we're talking about, this is 2014. So yes, Kickstarter was throwing up watches, but no one had yet written the blog post about how to set up a Kickstarter watch company. So no one had ever really written something to explain about different companies you could approach. So in 2015, I went to Baselworld, which was the peak year for Baselworld. And so I'm pleased that I've experienced it at its peak. And I went there and I just, went with an idea of I know nothing, but hopefully if I, talk to companies, someone might help me. Because as well as there being, big brands, there are also all the manufacturers and suppliers behind it. And this was a huge stroke of luck. So I was staying in a bed and breakfast on the outskirts of Basel, right next to the airport. It still cost me about £150 a night, but that's Basel.
Yeah.
And it was about a 20-minute walk to the nearest tram stop. And then anyway, one evening I was walking back from the tram stop, and I noticed there was this old elder gentleman sort of shuffling back from the stop as well. Anyway, I thought nothing of it. I then realised that we were on the same floor in the Airbnb, and we shared a kitchen. So I went to make a cup of tea to take it back to my room to, like, basically this is the end of day one, and I've learnt nothing. And I'm like, this was a waste of time. Anyway, as I'm making the cup of tea, as any good Englishman would do, would you like a cup of tea? Offer it to a stranger. And he was like, oh, yes, I would. Oh, I used to live in London in the 70s, So I made him a cup of tea. We got sat down. He's like, oh, what are you here to do? Anyway, it turned out he was recently retired. He had been the secretary for Basel. And so I said to him, this is what I'm wanting to do. And he said, oh, okay, well, look, why don't we meet up tomorrow afternoon at the show, and I can point you in some directions. So after lunch, I met at the agreed time, and he was like, right, we've got 5 meetings this afternoon. The first one is with the CEO of this person. This person does dials. This person does, and basically I got introduced to all these incredible people. So, I ended up working with a couple of those companies, but the bigger thing was suddenly understanding how it all goes together.
Yeah.
Not literally how a watch goes together. I knew that amount, but it was how the industry goes together, where A gets their parts from B, from C, and how all that goes. Yeah, on reflection, it's really scary to think if I hadn't offered a cup of tea to that guy.
Yeah, it could have gone a completely different. Yeah.
Or if I hadn't actually said to my parents at that Sunday lunch, or there's so many things where it's that wonderful.
What ifs?
Yeah, it's like that film Sliding Doors.
Yeah.
You sort of think all these things of what if this hadn't happened or that hadn't happened. But
Dave's too young to know what Sliding Doors is. Dave didn't.
I'm just nodding along.
We're the old ones here.
Gwyneth Paltrow, does that name mean anything?
I know, yeah.
No, you don't.
No, she's the blonde one, isn't she?
Yeah. No, but it's crazy to think that that's a big influence on where you are now because of that chance meeting.
And well, I mean, the Brunswick wouldn't exist if I hadn't launched with the Redcliffe and where I launched. Because people have said to me, well, why didn't you launch with the hand-built mechanical watch? And you're like, firstly, I'm self-funded the business. And it's one thing self-funding when you're, speaking to established Swiss manufacturers and you're looking at Swiss quartz. And it's another thing when you start looking at hand-building watches like the Brunswick. It's on a different kind of money level. And I just did not have the cash for that. But also I didn't know the people. And actually, if I'd approached the companies and approached, the engineering firms, they would have taken one look at me and laughed me out the door. Whereas when you go to them saying, well, look, I've been trading for a year already. I'm an established business. I'm a launch business. Here are some articles written about me. Like suddenly they'll go, okay, well, let's sit down and talk.
Yeah.
It's that
kind
weird
of gives
thing.
you that like little edge of like credibility, and just in terms of you kind of have got into your stride. You kind of know like kind of what you want, and then this is their next level. You're not just some person with a kind of crazy dream who wants to just go straight in at that kind of level. You've obviously built it up and have a continuation of and like a follow up of where you're going with it.
There's also a thing of you realise more and more how to work with these firms. So I go in with a typical sort of attitude of, oh, well, hello, my name is Nicholas and I'm wanting to restart my family's watch company, and it gets you nowhere. They're not interested at all. And I realised very quickly that if I went in and said, hi, I own Britain's oldest watch company, that's got their attention, their respect. They're going to sit down and talk to you. Now, technically, it's one of Britain's oldest because, of course, it's it's always playing with the heritage. I know what my heritage is. It started in 1846. It ran till the early 70s and then it stopped. But it is that thing of actually being able to say, look, we're a 172-year-old company with a 50-year break, but
just ignore that bit.
Well, I don't. So right from the start, I was adamant that I was going to make a point about it. And someone actually picked up on it just before I launched on Instagram and said, you know what, this is refreshing that someone isn't trying to just whitewash over the period. Because, of course, so many Swiss companies do this. So many big Swiss brands today, if you actually look at their history, their timeline, there is a nice big gap from the 60s to the 90s to the noughties to whenever the VP company decided to restart them. No, that doesn't mean they don't make good watches.
Tudor is a good example.
Yeah.
Big example.
Probably the biggest example.
Yeah, I mean, they weren't selling anything in Europe for how many years?
Yeah,
you know.
yeah.
And then North America, they only started releasing them with the Black Bay, was it not? Or was it even later than that? Was the Black Bay...
No, I
Maybe
think
I'm wrong. Maybe
it
I'm
might have been.
wrong.
So I was working at Rolex when Tudor came back to the UK, and that was really exciting because I'd worked in PR before. They realised that I could talk technically about the watches to journalists, but also because I'd worked in PR, I wasn't going to basically screw up and say something I shouldn't be saying, you know. And so I got to help out at the launch events, which was amazing. It was so much good fun. I think Mark Ronson played, which was really exciting. And then I helped at Salon QP, where they then did a massive event, and it was a really exciting time. I mean, that's how you do a launch when you've got good money behind you.
Totally.
But also, it was a careful thing because it was having to reposition Tudor within the market. Because before, it always had a perception of just being a poor man's Rolex, which it wasn't. But that was the perception, and I think they've done really well. Like, I love what Tudor do today, and I love the fact that actually Tudor is kind of seen as the cooler of the two. Like, it's
like they're willing to push the boat out a bit more with Tudor. For example, making the smaller case size in the Black Bay.
I think it's their realm to, and their kind of device they use for experimenting with like different colours. So you've got the all different ranges of the Black Bay. Then you've got the Black Bay, the small ones, and they've now got the black and the blue dial, and then it's just that kind of, it's a lot more playful in terms of having like things like the faux patina, which you'd probably never see ever in a Rolex, just because it's not
the Black Bay Dark.
Yeah,
I mean, I think of the years we would say to people who came in St James's Square with their Bamford Rolex or their Pro Hunter Rolex, and we'd smile and say, "We're not touching that." Of course we're not going to touch it because it's not been done. And they were like, "Oh, are Rolex ever going to do a black watch?" No. But then suddenly Tudor brought that out, and it's really interesting to see the reaction to it. And actually, when you see one and handle one, it's been done well.
Yeah,
it's a cracking watch.
Yeah. I think that was one of the, because I wasn't really like into watches, or like I was, but then I was kind of just expanding my like kind of knowledge in terms of what brands were, what they offered, that sort of stuff. So I got invited to a Tudor event, and it was when they had just released. I think it was just after they released. Yeah, it was when they released the bronze, but then they had the PVD black one there, and I thought that was the one that I'd buy just because I put it on, and it just felt so nice. It looked so cool, that stealthy.
PVD has that beautiful finish. Well, it's like that. Where's it? Oh yeah, it's down there. It's like that seagull I showed you.
Yeah,
that black PVD finish.
There's just something about it. Yeah,
no polish, no surface finish applied to a piece of metal will ever give you that sort of slipperiness to it. It's lovely.
Yeah, they were great.
Will I ever see a black PVD Fears?
Oh, that would be controversial. Never say never.
Speaking, can we swap watches?
Yes, we most certainly can.
I want to just sit and wear that for a wee bit, because I know I've looked at it for a little bit. There you go, you can have that. Wear that.
So what just happened is Alan has swapped his
yeah, we need to describe this.
Not like a wristwatch yet. So Grand Seiko been switched for a Brunswick.
So how did...
By the way, this Grand Seiko is beautiful. This really is beautiful. I know I tried it on for a couple of moments earlier, but...
Oh, you can wear it.
Yeah, that is lovely.
If there's any long pauses, that's why.
Yeah, exactly. We're just staring at the dial, and also the weight.
Yeah.
I've forgotten about wearing a bracelet watch. It's like... that's very nice. Yeah, I'm very happy.
And looks, amazing. So, but anyway, enough about that. We've spoke about that loads. How did you come up with the design of this? It's...
Because you said before it was like a mix of kind of a lot of the archival material you found with Fears, so it's like different elements from a lot of different watches then.
Yes, so So the basic case shape, and I say the basic case shape because there are some differences, but the cushion case is inspired from a watch from 1924, which I've brought with me today, actually. I'll show it to you in a bit. And that's a cushion case, but that's a stamped cushion case. So it's much flatter, whereas with this, it's much more curvaceous. Yeah. And I was very keen that it was, it is a cushion, but it has got many more curves to it. So I started off with, I wanted it to be a cushion case. My love of those is because those bits on the corner serve absolutely no function whatsoever. If you had a square or a rectangle, then you have a square or rectangle dial, and you could argue about legibility, even though I would say the round dial is always the most legible. Yeah. The whole reason those corners exist is just pure decadence, and I love it. It's such a 1920s, 30s thing to have done, which is when that shape came out. It was before the Second World War, the round watch wasn't dominant. Yeah. It was only after the war that it became dominant. I mean, I look at the archive of Fears. We were doing octagons, tonus, rectangles, all kinds of shape. Like, I'm amazed there isn't an equilateral triangle in there. But I knew it had to be that cushion case. But I also was really adamant that it felt, you put it this way, when you put it in your hand, you want to rub your finger over it. And that's because of the curves. So actually, before I did the look down diagram, or designs, the sketches, the first line I ever drew was basically from the top of the crystal to the back of the bottom crystal on the case back. And it was that line, that curve of how it sweeps around with the bezel. I then got out a ruler and then sliced it up like a hamburger and was like, right, this is where the glass ends, this is where the bezel ends, this is where the case back starts, and then decided, right, we've now got the free parts of the case and the glass. And for me, that was a really important, it was about that curve. And because also, bear in mind, I designed it at a time when I was going on the tube a lot. And so I'm very aware that a watch has to slip under a cuff quickly because you don't always want your watch out on display, But it's also, it just feels more organic.
And are you designing that purely from an aesthetic point of view, or are you aware, okay, I need to fit a movement in this? Is it being designed around that, or at that point did you know anything about the measurements, the case sizes? How does that work?
So I knew what the case size maximum could be, because I knew that if I was going to wear it, which I knew I'd need to be able to promote it and talk about it, it couldn't be over 40. So actually, this is an interesting side note. We first considered putting a unitas in there. But to put a unitas in that shape case meant that it was going to be 46, just like a Panerai. There's a reason why a Panerai is so big, because basically a cushion case with those curves, you have to just make it bigger and bigger because the unitas is a big slab of a movement. Yeah. So I knew that it wasn't ever going to be a big watch. I knew it was going to be smaller. And also because of the cushion having a larger surface area, I knew that you can have quite a small watch and it still feels quite substantial on the wrist. I didn't start thinking of, right, it's going to have this movement and this movement is this size and all of that. That's almost the nice thing to do afterwards. Yeah. It's going, actually, let's try and get the basics right of when it's on your wrist. I mean, don't get me wrong, like, having done everything I did at Rolex, I care about watch movements. Of course I do. But I think it's one part of the puzzle. And actually, the proportions are far more important, in my opinion.
I think when you think about it as well, it's probably the most important and then the least important thing. So it's the most important in terms of the prolonged lifespan of how long this. If you put a good movement in it, something that's reliable, then it will last a long time. Yeah. But then it's the least important because it's something you never get to see. If somebody else is wearing that watch, you'll never see the movement. No. Until you turn it over and then look at the case back, which, if you see it in the street, it's not going to happen. And it's like, so it's that kind of balance.
Also, you're probably in trouble if you're in the street and you're turning your watch over.
Exactly.
You haven't got it for much longer.
But it's like that kind of thing where it's where does the line draw between having the importance of the movement compared to the importance of design? And I probably see design's a thing that gets you that kind of instantaneous, I love that, or that's the thing that draws you in. That's the thing. 90% of
almost
looking
it
at
has
something,
to, unless you know already what
Yeah.
the internals are. And most of the time, you don't.
No.
These
And
things.
and most of the time, even if it's something that is not up to your, if you've got a standard, if you love the design of it, that's going to completely outweigh. Because like that seagull that you've got, that probably doesn't have the fanciest chronograph movement ever in it, but it's got, the watch has got a sort of a form of charm to it, where it just looks really cool. It's got that.
Yeah.
There's just something about it. It's got character. I think that's like.
So when I was designing it, I knew that I wanted to have a sub-seconds. That was quite an important sort of link back to the archive watch. But I didn't know what movement would be powering it. I knew it was probably going to be a manual wind, not an automatic. And I knew that if you go, free hands with a sub-seconds, manual wind, you'd look at there's a handful of movements you can use. So I knew it would be one of those. But for me, it was get the proportions right, get those curves right. And I mean, that it sounds weird to say, but that profile curve, because we don't live in a what's on my wrist Instagram world. We're not always looking at our watch straight down with our hand, No, we look at the watch at all kinds of angles. And so actually those are, for me, more important than what it looks. And you were saying earlier, no photograph does it justice.
No. It definitely needs to be worn.
Yeah.
It's...
And handled and kind of felt, basically.
Because when you take one photo looking down,
it's
like you're seeing, it's a snapshot, but actually you need that, you almost need it to be like a video showing it. It's just like the dial on this Grand Seiko. Like, however much you try and photograph it, you need to see how the light catches it to understand. You need that movement. It brings it to life.
Yeah.
Otherwise, you look at it and go, "Yeah, it looks great. Wow, I get it now."
Yeah.
So for me, that's why I started with the profile on the side. When it came to the numerals, the 1924 watch from the archive has an enamel dial. It has black painted numerals, so painted by hand, and then it has blued spade hands. And I looked at it and I said, I love the blued, the traditional thermal bluing. I love the black and I love the white. I just hated the dial. And when I show it to you, you'll see why. It looks like an Edwardian mantle clock. It just looks so... it looks like a pocket watch which has been shrunk. It's just not a nice dial. A couple of people, when I launched the Brunswick, said, why didn't you just use that? And I was like, well, the fact that 2 people out of 200 have said I should have done that. So, in fact, those numerals are taken from a watch from 1946 that Fears created as part of their centenary collection. And what I love about them is, just like the logo, so the Fears logo is taken from 1946 as well, it's a time which was very austere. 1 year after the Second World War, watches are still governed by government-controlled prices because it's a luxury good. And there's huge rationing. And yet, when you look at those numerals, they're not as austere as they first look. They've got little kinks, little turns to them. Look at the 2 in particular. The way it curls round and it just keeps curling round. That number 2 has such a little personality.
Yeah, totally.
And yet, when you first look at it, you go, it's... You first look at them and go, well, they're not serifed numerals. They're quite sans serif. They're quite, utility. And then you look, and I think that's something... There's a wonderful quote. I think Terence Conran said it, or I'm about to totally misquote him. But anyway, it's about the British sensibility of design, about purposeful yet graceful. And I think that's something I like. It's the idea that, a watch has got to be legible. It's got to be, you glance at it, you see it. But actually, the more you look at it, the more you should notice and pick up. And it's why I love things like the firmly blued hands. Because at first, you think, they're black. They're skeleton. Oh, wow, And then you start looking at them, and then you realise that actually they're firmly blued, which means that they change colour, 100 times a day. In every light, they're a different shade of blue. And that's actually something that that's the reason I've put it on a blue strap. If you put that watch on a black strap, it will make the hands look blacker.
Yeah.
It's...
I'm definitely
very, very taken back.
Yeah.
What made you go with the skeletonized hands over solid needle hands? Or
Yeah, so we have actually we made one Brunswick which had Superluminova in filling that void, which is easy enough to do, and it looked fine. But I made it very clear that my preference was that it should be a skeletonized hand. So if you look at the watch from 1946, it's 1946 that the hand shape's taken from. A lot happened in 46. This centenary collection has inspired a lot. I knew I wanted that shape. It's the same shape that I have on the Redcliffe. But on the Redcliffe, they're painted black and filled with Superluminova. So for this, I said, right, well, let's blue it. And it was around that time I actually acquired a watch into the archive, and the minute hand, the loom had fallen out of it. And as you're moving it around the dial, I loved the way that it went over the numerals and it went over the logo.
Yeah.
And it was really charming seeing that hole in the hand. And I thought, you know what? Why don't we just do that? So on the prototype, we said, no, don't put loom in. There were a lot of decisions that were made as we were building the prototype. And I kid you not, these were decisions where I'd get a call Saturday night from the workshop, and they'd say, do we do A or B? We need to make a decision right now. There's no, and you're thinking, I'm sat in the pub. Like, how can I make a decision? But you just stop and think, what's the gut saying?
Yeah.
And I think this goes to the thing. You can't design a watch by specification. You can't start with it's got to be A, it's got to be B, it's got to be C. Because by the time you've designed it, it's a lot of nothing to a lot of people.
It'll be characterless. Because I think there's like a charm to it that you look at it and you can immediately see the head that it's got heritage. It's not just plucked out of something that looks good in this 21st century. It's got with things like the text, the subdial, the hands, the case, even things like the lugs. It's all you can definitely tell that it's got some form of heritage to it.
But I was keen not to just recreate a watch from the archive.
It works. It's still with a modern take on it as well.
So it works when it's things like that Doxer.
Yeah.
With the orange dot. I mean, I love the fact that you pick it up and it feels right that it is a 1-1. It is an exact. Well, there are a couple of small changes, but it is the same. But I was really adamant that if I had just taken a watch from 1946 or 1924 and just recreated it, then people are looking, going, "Oh wow, it looks like a vintage watch." No, if you want a vintage watch, go on eBay. Just buy a vintage watch.
Yeah.
Because actually, it's not the aesthetic. What you get with a vintage watch, what people love about it is the fact that often that would have been someone's one watch. It would have been their treasured possession that they would have loved, and they would have worn it for all different stages of their life. And that's what's given it the charm. It's not just the look, it's everything that goes into it.
Absolutely.
So what I've tried to do is kind of use that as the basis of saying, if this was your one watch, would you still want to wear it in 30 years, 40 years? Or are you going to, in a few years' time, go, oh, you remember in 2018 when everyone was into vintage watches and, we really wanted that look? Do you see the difference? It's that thing of going, use some of those elements, but I always try and think, if Fears hadn't closed, if it had kept going, and in my imaginary world it was still a family-run business, and, what would it be creating today? It's that thing of the evolution. It's kind of using enough of the things that they used to do, but in a modern way.
Yeah, totally.
it is. I'm very, very impressed. It's just got this sort of explorer feel to it. It's almost, it doesn't feel like a dress watch to me. It feels like I should be outside, and I think that might be the white dial that's doing that. And like you said, the typography, the way the numerals are, it just makes me want to pick up a bag and go out and explore.
Yeah.
Like it's got that. It's just got that feel to it. It's very simple. Your brand name isn't overpowering the dial. You've got a very, very subtle sub-seconds, and then you've got this nice chapter ring just bordering the outside of it. It's just and a solid case. It's quite utilitarian in a way.
Yeah.
Like it's
meant to be an everyday watch.
Yeah,
which is what Fears used to make. And
it could easily be that, absolutely. And
I'm so glad there's no date on it.
Yeah. Now, bear in mind, I love dates personally.
Yeah.
For me, I love dates because I find them very useful. But I think for that watch, it needs to just be what it is.
It's
There's a random fact. You mentioned typography. So the word Brunswick on the dial, the same as the word Redcliffe on the Redcliffes, and basically on the website, in the printed brochure, I use my favourite typeface, which is Gill Sans, because it's clearly the best typeface ever invented. I use it because I mentioned before my love of trains. In the 20s, LNER adopted it. Well, in the 30s, even LNER adopted it. And so, like, Mallard had Mallard written in Gill Sans, and they used it in their publicity posters. You know, those beautiful interwar railway posters and all of that, the Flying Scotsman, all of this. So I was like, you know what? It's a beautiful typeface. Put it spaced out. It's got that sort of utility look to it, but it's still warm. The fact that the O is a perfect circle is quirky. I then discovered afterwards, someone sent me a note saying, oh, you know, I love the fact that the reason you're using Gill Sans is because, you know, it's a Bristolian font. I said, what do you mean? So I looked into it. Eric Gill he didn't invent Gill Sans as font. He basically helped out a mate in 1926 who was setting up a bookshop in the centre of Bristol. And this friend needed a sign to go above the door. And so Eric said, don't worry, I'll do you a really nice, clean, modern sign. Everyone will love it. And he did this sign, David Cleveland Books. 2 years later, Monotype commissioned Eric Gill to turn that sign into a typeface, which has become Gill Sans.
Yeah.
And it's that bizarre thing, by absolute chance, I've ended up, you know, everything I use is actually a font from, which was first used round the corner from where Fears used to operate in the same city.
It's like one thing after another just makes it, I think just a much more kind of, like, the more you know about it and the more that you get these stories, like the character just builds and builds and builds, not just of the watch, but of the whole company. It's everything itself. It's really, really cool.
Well, I've always had the opinion, if there's something you're going to do, you either like research it and do it properly, even though the Gill Sans was pure fluke, or you don't do it. Like, you know, it's little things like the packaging for all the watches today is a dark blue box with a cream inside. For 20 years, in the 40s and 50s, all Fears watch boxes were dark blue with cream insides. Now those boxes were tiny little things because, of course, the box used to be almost a disposable item, right? But it's that kind of like, actually that was important to me, like to keep certain traditions alive. The box today is completely different. It's a modern box, you know, but it's using those elements of how things used to be done. So the model reference on the Brunswick starts BS2 3800. So the BS2 is the postcode today of Brunswick Square. So the Redcliffe starts BS1, which is the postcode today of Redcliffe Street. The 38 is for 38mm. The next 0 means it has no function, no complication other than time. And then the final 0 means it's steel. So that final digit I kind of stole from Rolex Tudor a bit. But, you know. But for me, it's sort of like, actually, if you're going to have a model reference, then it needs to mean something. It needs, you know, it needs to be broken down and processed. Yeah. It's when you see things like this beautiful Grand Seiko, like, I don't understand their references. I'm sure you can explain it to me. I just don't understand it.
Yeah, Omega's the worst. Like, their references are just hideous. And then
they put dots in them. Yeah. They put like dot, two numbers, dot, two numbers, dot, and I'm like,
it's not all to do with the dial. So the dial's got a reference, the strap has a reference, the movement's got, and it's just all put together.
Yeah. Isn't that more? In my eyes, that's like a SKU number. Like,
it pretty much is, I think.
Yeah.
I think they just use the same numbers for both, probably.
But I mean, I would, going back to this, I would buy this.
Yeah.
You know, but like I said, I don't necessarily know if I would buy one just by seeing photos of it, but seeing it in person is totally,
because I liked it seeing it in photos, but as soon as you walked in with it, I was like, that's one fucking cool.
The
watch.
worrying thing is, like, there's plenty of watches where I've seen photos of it and gone, yeah, I like that, and then I've seen it and gone, yeah, I don't like it as much anymore. that isn't the case with this at all. It's as far from that. I've been quite quiet since I've put this on the list because I keep just staring at it. I absolutely love it.
Well,
I think for me, it's just the sizing's perfect.
Yeah.
Perfect.
It does seem to suit small and larger wrists, which I think is quite an unusual thing. But it's like we were saying earlier about the Submariner. Like, for a 40mm watch, it can fit small wrists quite comfortably. But it's why on the Instagram, I always, you have to put up, like any business, you've always got to put up those polished studio shots.
Yeah.
But actually, what I really like putting up are the photos that people who own the watch send me. Because they're kind of real photos. Mm-hmm. They're, and they're the ones that actually, they're not taken straight on. They're taken with a few reflections. But that's good. The reflections actually show the shape of it.
Yeah.
I mean, the crazy thing I found out recently is that, you look through, you go on websites, you're looking at the watch. Most of the watches you're looking at are renderings. Mm-hmm. They're not actual photographs. Because nowadays you can do a rendering which is better than a photograph.
Yeah.
Well, it misses something.
It's cheating.
Exactly. But it's interesting what you say about the you probably wouldn't buy it just from the photo. So I was saying earlier, I've been doing this store in London and it's just been a pop-up.
Yeah.
I primarily have done it as a sort of marketing thing. It's a nice to kind of spread the word and, and also it allows people to come and see watches but see the museum and, have a bad coffee made by me and, But the thing I've been shocked by is the number of people who have come and then bought the Brunswick, and these are people who I've been emailing, or they've been following the Instagram. They've been seeing the watch over the last year, but they've needed to try it on. And it's that thing where you go, wow, I'm a business that's almost entirely an online business, but it is that thing where actually you need to get it on the wrist. You need to. Or there needs to be some better way of communicating how a watch fits on the wrist. I don't know.
Because when you first launched it, I think after I caught wind of it, I'm sure I sent you a message saying, is there any places that's available in Scotland? Because I didn't know the kind of how kind of small.
I remember I was at my storage unit the day I got that message. I was like running around in my ripped Levi's moving boxes because we'd just done the show.
Yeah.
And I got this message and I was like, Scott, no, we don't have anywhere in Scotland. I was like, I could jump on a train, but
because I've always kind of liked from the start, but again, just seeing it it just kind of raised it to that kind of next level. Like, it's actually design wise and kind of feel wise, it's fantastic. I think it's really good.
What is the logo?
The pipette.
Yes.
You probably saw I've got an enamel badge of it on my blazer jacket.
And it's on the movement as well. Yeah.
So that became the Fears logo, but I never designed it as a logo. It's actually the hour marker on the Redcliffe.
Yeah.
So when I was designing, the Redcliffe came first. That was in 2016. So when I was designing that, I knew I wanted that shape of hand taken from the watch from 1946. So it's like a lozenge hand, which then, rather than curving to a smooth end, it then goes to a little point, a little kind of graceful point. Because of that point, you can't then put a squared off batten or a round batten. Visually it looks horrendous because you've got a point going towards a square. Mm-hmm. And after months of playing around with different designs of batten, I then decided, well, what if I just took the hand and flipped it round and then just curved off the back? So effectively I made a mirror image of the hand, so that when it comes down, you've got these two graceful points coming together, and it worked. It just immediately looked the right shape. Then when I came to doing the date window on the Redcliffe date, I was like, right, I need to have... I wanted something to draw the eye to the date. I always think with a date window, you can try and hide it, but if you've got it, do something with it. Mm-hmm. And so rather than putting like a Cyclops on or something like that, I decided basically the batten at 3 o'clock is much bigger and incorporates the date within it. It still has luminosity either side of the date window, but it basically is an oversized batten. So a few months go past after the launch, and I needed to put up an Instagram post saying when the company was closing at Christmas. And so I basically put up a simple square image which had the date window within the batten, and that was it. And it was then in January, I was having lunch with a watch blogger, and he said to me, "Oh, I love that shape. It's almost like, it's your shape. It's so distinctive. Why don't you use it as like, just put it out there?" So the next day, I basically put up a picture and put a watermark of the logo, but with no date window in it, just the shape. And people kept saying, "Oh, I love your logo. Oh, I'd never noticed your logo before." And so I slowly started using it more and more. And then it got to the point in 2017 for Salon QP, I basically had enamel pin badges made for the guys helping me on the stand. When I say the guys, it's not a marketing department. It was my husband. It was a friend from Yorkshire who came down for the weekend. It was my 2 housemates. It was a lot of McDonald's was eaten as payment for them in kind. But, and I wanted them on the stand to have something to identify them. Yes. So they had this. We basically got like 25 of these pin badges made. So 5 of us on the stand. We had 20 just in a box out back. After the first evening, they were all gone. Because people kept saying, "Oh, can I have one of I love your logo. Can I have one of those badges?" And it was amazing how basically it was it was basically an hour baton. And it's become the logo. And I like the fact that it's quite an organic shape. It's quite, it's quite an elegant shape. It doesn't mean anything. It doesn't do anything. But I don't know. It's something I quite like. Yeah. And also to me, it was never if I had tried to create a logo other than the name Fears, and Fears isn't a typeface. That is taken directly from the old logo. Mm-hmm. If I tried to create something, it would have been forced. Yeah. I could have had something. I could have had a logo which was, the Clifton Suspension Bridge, or some wonderful cliche, or probably not a crown. I might have got sued, but But the reason I put it on the movement is because of the work we actually do to the movement. Yeah. So we get the movements from ETA. The first thing we do is strip them down entirely, so that we can then basically service it and put our oils in, so that we know the movement is running okay, because it can be a bit hit and miss otherwise. We also have to change the cannon pinion, because the hands are laser cut, not stamped. That means they're much thicker than normal watch hands, which means that you actually need the minute basically has to sit much higher. So we change a few components for that, and for the seconds as well. And then we Geneva stripe and plate the bridges. And so because we've done that, I'm not going to put Fears on the movement, because it's not a Fears calibre. It's not an in-house movement. Mm-hmm. But actually, we've spent a good number of hours doing this work to it. So let's put the golden pipette on the movement as a sort of signifier that, it is ours. And then when it comes to the watch buckle, the old straps used to say FWC Ltd, Fears Watch Company Limited, because I didn't have a logo to put on there. I needed to put something on, so I put that on. But now I've got the pipette. The pipette now goes on the buckle.
It's a nice wee touch.
Definitely. Kind of ties it all in. It kind of just makes every aspect of it seem like which it is, but it makes it kind of signifies that kind of consideration you've put into each element of it. I think it's such a nice little thing.
And did a lot of the previous watches in the archive, a lot of them have onion crowns?
None of them.
No.
They all had either those proper sort of button crowns, right, the flat ones, or the ones that which were on the sort of, I'm going to use inverted commas, the waterproof, unbreakable watches. I'll show you some of the old adverts. The advertising they got away with in the 50s. The Fears Unbreakable Watch, guaranteed for 10 years. And you're looking at it thinking, my goodness, what on earth? But no, none of them had the onion crown. And so originally, I'd said we were going to put on a sort of rounded button crown. And again, this was one of these things. I suddenly get a picture message text to me from the workshop saying, okay, I know it's not what you had designed or requested, but we've got this crown and we think it looked quite nice against the watch. What do you... And they basically blue tacked it onto the side of the watch. And I was like, I love it. It's one of those things where you just look at it and go, sod what I had originally said about putting this, creating our own crown. So the crown isn't, that is a standard component. That isn't something that I have designed. But it suits the shape of the case. It works really well. So well.
I love it. Yeah. I think it's absolutely brilliant.
Yeah.
I mean, how much has the whole Instagram movement affected, or has it had a big positive on terms of the amount of watches sold? Do you think it would be harder if you didn't have things like Instagram now? And
I think yes and no.
Yeah.
Okay, so if we go back to when I bought my first proper Swiss watch, the Omega Seamaster I was telling you about, in 2005. I mean, in 2005, there was no Hodinkee, there was no blog to watch, there was no Instagram, there was no social media, basically. So if you wanted to read up about watches like I did, and I was so like no one was interested in watches back then. I mean, in 2005, yeah, they were, but it was so niche. It's almost gone, it started niche, it then went mainstream, and now it's gone, or it's now kind of fractured into niche, groups. So back then, if you wanted to learn about watches, I mean, the Omega website had nothing on it. Omega.ch had basically nothing on it. So you basically would read watch magazines, of which there were a handful, and that's where you got your information. So if you were in there, everyone was reading it, because that's where everything went. Also, it was back in the day where all watches had to be bought through ADs. You went to a jeweler, and that's where you bought a watch. Because online, I think Christopher Ward in 2004, started the gateway by going, we're only selling direct and we're selling online only. I mean, people take it for granted now that that's how it happens. Like you were saying, you bought your Doxa direct from
Doxa.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Well, I mean, you go back a few years and that just would not have been possible.
Yeah.
You go back to 2004, and I think Christopher Ward were pretty much the only guys doing that.
Yeah.
I said to them the other day when I met the founders, I was like, hats off to you, because a lot of what companies like what I'm doing today just wouldn't be possible unless you have huge backing, huge budgets to be able to pay for lots of advertising, to pay for, massive events, and also to get your watch into every single jeweler around the country. So, yes, in one way it would be very difficult to do fears today without things like Instagram. But at the same time, Instagram for me is it's where people might discover it. But it's not necessarily because they're discovering it through the hashtags that I very cleverly have put on there, because I'm not. I'm useless with my hashtags. It's because someone has, at an event, has taken a photo of the watch and put it up on their Instagram. And they're followed by maybe 150, 200 people. But the people who are following them are real watch enthusiasts.
Yeah.
And they are then going, ooh, what is that? Oh, they're tagged in. Oh, I can go. And everything's through the smartphone. They go through the... I don't think anyone has seen a watch on Instagram and bought it straight, that way. Because usually what people do will come to the website and then request a free printed brochure.
Yeah.
So I send out loads of printed brochures around the world. And these are traditional, it's a 32-page lithographed, it's a beautiful thing.
I think I've got one.
Have you got
one kicking around?
Okay, yeah.
I'm sure there's one in my flat somewhere. Yeah.
Right, but put it this way, you still have it. Yeah. If I'd sent you a PDF, it would either still be in your downloads folder, or you would have deleted it and recycled it.
Yeah. I'll need to get one to add to my pile down
here.
Yeah,
to add to the... But put it this way, I have one guy who's a very loyal follower. He's got the first brochure and the second brochure. The third brochure comes out next month. He's framed the two brochures. Because the first brochure was a very low run. It's almost like a first edition of a book.
Yeah.
He's like... But it's interesting. The first brochure shows because I designed it myself. I did a night course in InDesign, so I could do all my own graphics. And I look back on it now and it's like, it's so painful. So like everything's so shouty and loud, and
so you look back at your old like photos that you thought like you're amazing, like your street photography, and it's just really gritty, grainy, black and white things that are too much contrast of some old woman like having a cigarette. It's like you thought that was the epitome of what street photography was back in the day, but then it's just a terrible photograph of some old bat.
No,
it's like
it's that exactly.
It's
that.
Yeah, but the progression of like knowledge and your taste, and like,
it's also a refinement.
Totally.
It's about realizing that I always knew from the beginning that Fears was never going to become a massive mass market watch company. I never wanted it to be that. But certainly with things like the Brunswick, it's realising that actually it's really nice when you hand make a watch like that, and we make up to 70 a year. That means that I could pretty much, if you say a serial number, I can almost remember exactly the name of the person who owns and wears it, because I've actually had an interaction with them.
Yeah.
Half of the people who've bought not just the Brunswick but any Fears watch follow up a few weeks later with an email, and usually with a photograph of them wearing it. Half.
Yeah.
I mean, I'm blown away by this, but I'm so touched by it. I'm touched by the fact that, you know, someone has, you know, that used their hard-earned money to buy something that I've created, but it's not just something that, you know, is then just sat on the side.
Yeah.
Yeah, I had an email from a gentleman in Chicago the other day, and he said, you know, this is the 20th watch in my collection. He said, my Pateks haven't had a look in since I've got it. You think, well, I mean, that might be an exaggeration, you know, but you're thinking, that's incredible that, you know, he's got something like this next to this amazing collection of these incredible watches. But, and one guy said, and this I thought was very interesting, saying about the buying a watch unseen. So he was based in California. He bought the watch having not seen it. He'd seen photographs, he'd read reviews, but he hadn't seen it. And he admitted to me that he was, he basically was like, I was kind of 75% sure it was going to, you know, be worn a couple of times and end up in a drawer, you know, or end up in my watch box, but, you know, but I was willing to take a punt. And he was like, it's the complete opposite. He's like, you know, I've worn it every day for several weeks. I absolutely love it. It is incredible. And you're sort of thinking, that's what's nice. It's the fact that actually, if I was trying to design a watch that I wanted, you know, to sell tens of thousands to, it would not look anything like that. Yeah. For starters, the cushion case makes up what, about less than 0.5% of the watch market?
Yeah.
I think it's about being independent by being self-funded, but also having that heritage and legacy behind me, is going, actually, let's create something a bit different.
Yeah.
Let's, you know, I'd rather put personality into it. You know, people have asked me why there isn't going to be a Fears diving watch, because diving watches are very, very popular with collectors, they're very commercial. I can't swim. And so I'm not going to make a diving watch, because I'm just like, I'm sorry, if the guy who owns and runs the business can't swim and is never going to need or wear a diving watch, why should it do that?
Yeah.
Now, yeah, as an entrepreneur, I hate that word, but as an entrepreneur, as a businessman, it's probably a bad commercial decision. But sod it, I own 100% of the business. Like, I haven't got to answer to some investors saying, you need to do this to do that. And it means that you can create things like that, rather than, you know, the second watch I launched being something which was, you know, something completely with a commercial background.
So what is next for Fears?
Well, there is a new watch coming out next month on the 7th of November, which is very exciting. I brought a prototype to show you.
Oh, very nice.
Depends when will this podcast go out? When can we talk about this?
Oh. When do you want it to go out? We can put it out whenever you want. We can put it out after. What day are you looking to?
So that's Wednesday the 7th is the launch day.
November.
Yeah.
Oh,
so that's like
we can hold this off
Yeah.
until then.
Okay.
Yeah. Let's see.
Let me go and grab it.
Whilst you're grabbing that, I'm just gonna keep admiring this.
It's stunning. It wears so nicely.
So how did the feedback go with people on, you know, the platform like Hodinkee then? You know, if you're really classing Hodinkee as, well, I would probably class Hodinkee as the biggest,
the most kind of popular
online blog site, company, whatever you want to call them now. How did it go down when did they approach you, or did you
they approached me, which was utterly charming, because I've been reading Hodinkee for years, and for me this is the thing, whenever there's a piece of coverage about Fears, it's a real, like, I've been reading this for years, like, and here I'm seeing it written about, you know. I tell you what, the most proudest moment was there was a piece recently about the Brunswick in City AM, which is a London newspaper given out in the city and the financial district for free every morning. My dad's a corporate lawyer in the city, and I sent him a message saying, oh, by the way, you might want to pick up a copy, because I think there's a thing about Fears. He said, "Oh, I'll pick up some." And then my mum told me that he basically picked up the biggest stack ever and was sort of giving them out to people, going, this is Nick's company, But no, the Hodinkee was really interesting. And actually, the thing I was really, I'd obviously done an interview with the journalist, and he had done some incredible photography of it, really good photography. That's one thing. The comments are a completely different thing. And I get on quite well with several other British watch companies. There's this sort of layer in the watch industry. You've behind the doors, you've actually got a lot of the British, certainly in Britain. Yeah, I'd say at least half of the British watch companies regularly talk to each other. And when I say regularly, I mean like, I'll WhatsApp him, I'll be texting him, maybe once a day.
Right. Okay.
And whenever we meet up, there will always be heavy drinking sessions because of course, a lot of us use the same suppliers. A lot of us, have the same problems, the same issues. I mean, one guy who I get on particularly well with is Don, who restarted Vertex.
Right. Okay. Yeah.
Which is his family's watch company.
Yeah. My dad's actually got a really old Vertex pocket watch.
Oh really?
It's
wow.
So cool. It's so good. It's like mint condition. So it was like a family friend whose father collected watches and clocks and stuff. And this is the only thing that she's got. This is the only one that was still around after he passed away.
Right.
And then she gave it to my dad, and it's got its own little pouch, and it's got the similar to that the blued hands. It just looks stunning.
They did incredible watches. Well. So once a month, Don and I meet up and have lunch together. And it's that wonderful thing where you sit down, you have a 2-hour lunch, and, we're not always talking about watches and the watch industry, but, it's also really good fun. We'll show each other prototypes and be like, look, I'm thinking of launching this next year. What do you think of this? Because at the end of the day, there's no... When we're talking about watches like this, it's not a zero-sum market. It's not like someone is buying that one and they're not going to buy. It's a case of going, actually, these are people who are buying because they love it.
Yeah.
And so it was very interesting. Before this Hodinkee article came out, I'd spoken to several of the watch company owners, and I said to them, should I read the comments? I'm really worried about the comments because the comments are famous, right?
Yeah.
And I'd read the comments written about some of their watches, and I thought, my goodness, this is going to be tough. But I thought, actually, you know what? I've never shied away from any of that. Let's. What if one person made a comment or a suggestion that actually was bang on, was something I'd never thought of?
Yeah.
I think I mentioned to you earlier, I can be inspired by the colour or texture of a cocktail napkin in a bar. For me, inspiration comes from all kinds of places. Today I picked up a copy of the London Underground printed map. They still make them. Yeah. Because I love the illustration on the front. It's like a sort of, it feels 1950s. And I looked and I was like, oh, wouldn't it be nice to have something like that? I don't even know what I would use it for, but you pick it up and go, that would be really cool. So I thought, if I'm going to read these comments, but with an idea of try not to take it personally. And it's a really interesting experience when you've designed something and then you've put your heart and soul into it, and then you're reading people's not honest opinion, they're trolling opinion often. It's that sort of, because some people go really, really overboard, but actually people didn't say they didn't like the design. People were like, I really like the design. Oh, if only it was half the price. Oh, I'd buy one if it was half the price.
I think if you it's this I think anything online, if you put out something and go, even if it was half the price, you'd still go, oh, I want half the price. I think that's just, they kind of want what you're offering, but a little bit, they don't want to, they're a little bit cheaper. I think even if it was anything, I think with any sort of price point, I think they'd still, there's always going to be that kind of comment. Exactly.
And so at Basel World, Tissot launched a Tissot which has a Unitas movement in it, and it's got the seconds over at 9 o'clock. And I couldn't believe it. You're reading the press release and then you see the price. They're selling it for about 10 Swiss francs more than I can get that movement for. And you go, oh, but hang on, Unitas is actually owned and made by ETA, which is part of the Swatch Group. as is Tissot. That's why they can do a watch for that price with that movement. That's why I could never do a watch for that. You know, it's that thing where you go, you know what, it's fine, because not everyone, you know, and you wouldn't expect everyone to kind of know all the ins and outs of the industry. But it is that thing where you look at, you know, I mentioned earlier, the hands on the Brunswick are 2/3 the price of the movement. So when people go, oh, well, I could get that ETA movement in that watch, I'm sure you could. But I mean, the case on that watch is astronomically expensive. Not only is it expensive from the machining side, but each case takes a day and a half of polishing.
All made in England?
Yes.
Yes.
And so when you think of that, you know, there's one watchmaker who works 5 days a week, and you give him 20 cases. You do the math, that's pretty much a month's work just on cases. But he's still got to service those movements. He's still got to, when the hands are laser cut, he then spends half a day with a microfile, beveling them, polishing them, and then firmly bluing them. So just to make a set of hands is, you know, over half a day's amount of work.
I apologise to anyone listening here and the clicking noise. I'm just photographing this just now. It is just something else.
Yeah, it's stunning.
Yeah, mate, you've knocked this one out of the park.
Thank you.
You really have. There's not many watches that I can remember lately where I've seen it and been like, that's, I don't know what it is. I think it's just an accumulation of the size, the design, it's,
I think for me the
and the
store
strap as well. The strap, that's one of the best leather straps, and I'm assuming that's a fairly new strap. It doesn't look like it's been worn all that much.
So that's the shorter one, isn't it?
Yeah.
So that's, even though that watch head isn't my personal Brunswick, that strap is my personal strap.
Oh,
so I've actually worn that strap, I think, over a month now.
Oh, really?
Every day.
It looks like it's brand new.
Yeah,
well, that explains why it's really comfy then. It's been worn in, but it's super comfy.
But when it comes to straps, I've always got a thing of, when I was at Rolex, people would come in and say, oh, I've got my watch, I would like a new leather strap. And you go, wonderful, wonderful, sir or madam. We can offer you black or brown, in alligator or calf. That's it. I was immediately like, no, I need to do more colours. And actually, let's consider the strap is 70% of what's touching your skin.
Yeah.
Like, you know, if your bracelet on your Black Bay wasn't comfortable or wasn't nice, you know, you would quite rightly be the first person to complain about that. People go, oh, I hate this bracelet. Oh, I don't like it. It's, you know, it feels cheap. People let bad straps go with no comment. And it really annoys me.
Yeah.
It really annoys me. So I was like, no. The strap needs to be decent. Plus, also, every strap my company makes has easy, quick release spring bars. Because I don't understand why not everyone does that.
Yeah.
Because they're as secure as normal spring bars, and yet it means that you can change it over.
Yeah.
And people often will buy the watch and buy multiple straps. Because if you put that on the tan leather, or you put it on the black, not only does it change what colour the hands look, it changes the whole look of the watch.
Yeah, totally. And it means that the watch is protected more as well. So we've got a mate, Ben, who got a Black Bay 36 for his 21st birthday.
God, that's a nice
and,
gift.
Yeah, pretty much the first time he went to change the strap, take the bracelet off to put on the leather strap,
I know what you're about
the
to tell
tool
me.
slipped, and then he's literally got, it's like the Grand Canyon just right in the middle across like most of the case back. It's like this big massive gouge out it. I was like, it's pretty much the first chip that or the first scratch that he put on it, and it wasn't even like an accident where he kind of knocked it on his hand or something like that. It was him trying to change or get the bracelet off and fucking gouge half the metal off. But
the one thing that would make this
I know exactly what you're going to
perfect
say.
for me,
Drilled lug holes, mate.
drilled lug holes on that would look amazing. But that's just me.
Yeah.
I love that, because to me it feels like a tool watch. Like it's it feels like a field watch, an explorer's watch. And I think if that had drilled lug holes, not to make it easier for changing straps, although that is, I just think
visual.
Drilled lug holes just give you that tool feel, that outdoorsman feel, and I think it would look so good on them.
Yeah,
always an idea.
Something for 2019.
A one-off special edition for me would be fine.
Do two off because I've brought one as well.
We'll do a special duo pair.
Yeah. So let's see this.
Okay, so
then.
This hasn't got the right hands on, but these hands are an option. The hands on this watch are firmly blued. The final hands will not be firmly blued, and you'll see why they won't.
Fucking hell.
So I've nicknamed this watch. Well, I say I nicknamed it. I've actually now putting it into the brochure as this. It's being called the Brunswick Midas. I think for quite an obvious reason.
Yeah.
That's so nice.
So let me explain what watch you've got on your wrist. It's not a steel watch, but it's also not a solid gold watch.
Yeah.
The case is machined from marine bronze. It's then coated in 18 karat rose gold, and then it's coated in 9 karat yellow gold. The combination of the 2 karat weights, but also the 2 colours against the bronze, give you this unique colour. And this is the colour that the old rolled gold cases from the 1940s and 50s look. It's got that sort of old gold look. But also the great thing with using marine bronze is it takes the coating, the plating, like nothing else. It just sucks in the colour, which means it's a much tougher, much harder finish than if you were to coat it onto a steel watch. We also do a different finish on the movement. So on the steel Brunswick, it's Geneva striped. This movement is stippled. So basically you go over it creating lots of little circles, little dots, and it gives it an effect that's almost like paper. Mm-hmm. It's quite a traditional method, which is similar to old pocket watch movements. Mm-hmm. And then we again do the dual coating of the 2 golds, and then we put the gold pipette on.
It's beautiful.
That's stunning.
Yeah.
So I'll show you a photo from the photographer who sent me this over dinner this evening. So this is, bear in mind, this is unedited. But that's what it will be with the matching polished and then coated gold hands.
That looks really cool.
Yeah. It's... I thought it was bronze when you pulled it out.
Yeah.
Oh, that's tough having them side by side.
Because I like the kind of the steel, just because, like Alan said, with the kind of utilitarian kind of officer's watchy type kind of feel to it.
Yeah.
But like I said, when you change the strap, if you put it on like a black like alligator, then you could wear it with a fancy suit or tuxedo or something like that. But then
that's a dress.
This with materials wise heightens that so much more.
Yeah. It's
feels...
quite a different watch.
Yeah.
Yes.
So the very first batch of those that we made, we basically made 5 watches. One of those is the try-on watch, which is then going into the archive. Mm. And so there's just 4 in the very first batch. So I've been busy showing it to the Fears collectors, the people. We have one gentleman who owns 6 Fears watches. Bizarrely, he didn't buy one though.
I'm trying to think if I've seen a gold and white dialed watch before. I don't know if I have.
It's a really striking combination.
Yeah,
because usually you'd see it against gilt or silver or
Cartiers.
Yeah.
JLCs.
but any that stand out, I think it's a mixture again of the case, because you've got that it really pops.
Yeah. It's a colour that is almost so. This huge photo brief I gave the photographer, the big thing I wrote a whole page basically describing the colour and saying to him, this is the colour. And in the end, when I hand delivered the watch, I said, look, we're going outside on the street. It was an overcast day. And I said, I need you to see what we're both looking at. That's the colour. I don't want it. It's not a rose, but it's not a yellow. It is between the two. This comes also from a basis, probably see I've got very pinky skin. If I put yellow gold on, it looks really brassy. Like it doesn't look right. Rose gold looks much nicer, but I'm not a huge fan of rose gold personally. I think it's been a bit sort of Michael Kors, that sort of like
overused.
Yeah, it's been overused a lot recently. It is a beautiful color, but you have some shades that are very pink, and some that are very red, and whereas with this, it's a more unique color. The buckle is done to match as well.
I really like the colour of the strap on that. Yeah, it's not the same.
It is the same.
That's the same strap.
Same strap.
That's crazy, because I'm obviously sitting in a wee bit of a shadow there. The strap is...
It looks much bluer, doesn't it? Usually you'd put a gold watch on a black strap, but actually the blue is the... But what I've done for the very first watches, I've said to people, you can have blued hands or you can have the gold hands.
I think the blue still works because you've got that blue strap. It ties it all together.
Yeah.
I think from that photo, the blue does seem a little bit more legible.
Yes.
Like, just because, it could just be the photo, but the kind of hands seem to, because they're quite light, obviously a lot lighter as well, they did seem to kind of blend in with the dial, a little bit, less so than these. I think I personally like the black, the blued hands over the kind of the gold ones. But I think it's just on a purely legible premise.
It's beautiful.
Yeah.
I mean, that's why we're offering it as an art. I keep saying we. I keep saying I'm so used to using the royal we on Instagram and things. It's me. I am the only person who works in Fears. So, but yes, the royal we offer both options, and it's really interesting actually, because of those first 4 watches, the gold seemed to be more popular, but everyone has had to see them together and gone, which do I prefer?
Will the guys get to see that tomorrow?
Yes.
Yeah.
But they'll be able to see it tomorrow, but probably with a photo ban.
Yeah. Delete those photos, Dave, that you just did.
I'll save them for the 7th or today.
No, it's good that they'll get to see them.
Yeah. No, I think, the thing is, it's, if they see it and then they see a photo of it being released in a few weeks, you have to see it. You have to see that colour in the flesh. Just as you said, you have to see and handle the Brunswick to understand it. And
no, that's stunning.
I think there'll be a lot of very happy people tomorrow. Are you looking forward to the event? Are you?
I am. It's
say the event. It's not really. It's just a group of Scottish guys getting together to drink beer and talk watches.
But it's
not piss up, really.
Yeah.
It's always that thing. When I worked in PR years ago, you'd always say, be very wary of, ever dealing with members of the public. Members of the public can do all kinds of crazy things. Then you realise that actually what I love is, screw the members of the public. I want to talk to the people who are the watch nerds, the watch geeks, the watch enthusiasts, because that's me as well. It's that thing where, when I go to, I go to a few meetups down south. When I'm there with my, Nick hat on, not Nicholas Bowman-Scargill of Fears Watch Company. That's when I've got my seagull, and that's also where I'm there going, I sold my watches to start a watch company. I want to look and play and try on, and I can't walk past a jeweller's window with watches in without stopping and having a look, whatever it is, because you look and go, I quite like that, and I like that, and You know, you should see how many watches I've got saved on Chrono 24. I mean, not that I'm ever going to be able to afford to buy any of them, but you know, it is. You know, for me, it's good fun to go, and also to find out that story behind the watch.
Yeah.
So, when I was on the train up earlier, I'll show you this photo. I noticed the lady who was serving the gin and tonic at lunch. I think they're also serving water, but I went for the gin and tonic. She was wearing a Virgin Trains watch.
No way.
And I said, "Oh, your watch is Virgin Trains." And she said, "Yes, it is. But have a look at it. It doesn't have a crown. It's a completely radio-controlled watch." And she said, "Oh, I'm not meant to have it. It's issued to guards, train dispatchers and drivers, so that everyone's watch is always to the second bang on."
That's
because
crazy.
when you dispatch a train, it has to be to the second, not a few seconds out. So everyone who works for Virgin on the West Coast, if you're a train driver, a dispatcher, you have one of those watches. She said basically she had smashed her watch while serving lunch one day, and she was like, "I want a new watch," so I got allowed to wear that. But I was like, this is amazing. I can't make one comment on her watch, and we're having this 5-minute conversation. I've learned so much. And she really loves it because she's like, you know, she's really proud of the company she works for, and she loves the fact that she's wearing a tool watch that has been designed for, you know. I love that. Every watch tells a story, even if the story is just, I needed something for work. Well, why? Oh, because I'm not allowed my phone out at work. Like, there you go.
Yeah.
There's a reason behind it.
They do.
The story
They
behind
bring,
this is amazing.
They bring so many people together as well. People that may not have known people, you know, in previous generations, and
I think even just as a conversation start, there's been so many instances where I'll see somebody wearing something and I'll comment on it, and that creates just an immediate conversation. Then from there, pretty much a good probably solid 30-40% of the red bar of people being who either one of us or people we know have been going, "Oh, that's a cool watch."
Yeah.
We'd start talking about watch and go, "Oh, by the way, we also do this meetup thing," and then that creates from there. It's
almost like
weird. It's the guy. I don't know. It's just a bit bizarre. But
It's like people who have dogs, isn't it?
Yeah.
You know, if you go out walking a dog, you know, and you pass another person with a dog, have you ever seen them not stop and talk to each other? I mean, firstly, the dogs are fighting or trying to mate, but you know, the owners will start talking to each other. But also, I don't know that many people whose partners also indulge in the same passion. I know for sure mine does not at all. So actually, it's quite nice to be able to go and talk to like-minded people, and also people who are knowledgeable, but also respectful of the fact that not everyone has to wear this watch, because that's a status symbol and you have to wear it. Like, you know, I loved seeing the variety of people's collections. You know, there's one guy who I know quite well. He'll turn up to events, and sometimes he'll turn up with like, you know, a Baltic, or the other day he had some weird little quartz military watch. You know, a CWC, right?
Yeah.
And then next week he's got an MB&F. And you're just like, what on earth is going on here? But I love it.
Yeah.
Because he'll tell you exactly why he loves each of these watches. And I'm like, that's cool.
Yeah.
That's cool. Not just because he's able to have both of it, but like because he's passionate about it and he's not a snob about it.
Yeah.
And I think that's the thing. Like, it's really nice to meet people who love and appreciate watches, but they're not snobbish about it.
I mean, that's like the second rule we have after, you know, don't be a dick. You know, is no snobs. And, you know, everyone that we have coming along is crazy. It's, you know, we started out just doing this without the mics, just chatting about watches, and now we have 110 members signed up.
That's brilliant.
After, 4 or 5 events?
Yeah.
It's crazy.
Yeah.
We thought we'd be lucky if we get half a dozen.
And it's all getting
You know?
through word of mouth, through people's pure or sheer enjoyment of the events.
And we're probably the biggest dicks. That's there'll be a coup soon.
Ousters.
But that's what's always nice though about meetups, where they're not like, too often these things can end up being commercialized, and then it loses the kind of purity of the fact that it should just be word of mouth. It shouldn't be because you're trying to encourage.
We've been really lucky so far with it in terms of we've had lots of events with brands and things. But this, like this one we've got coming up tomorrow is a standard, back, like you called it, back to basics. It's just come along, bring your watches.
It's kind of what
let's just chat watches. It's because you don't
so
want to be getting
fortunately means
too many
Fears
of these
isn't going to get a huge bar bill at the end of the year.
But not that. I think you can get sucked into that commercial sort of side of it, and I think especially with a group of guys that that certainly come along to our Red Bar meetups and things. They're not the group. I say group of guys. Well, I say it's currently a group of guys. If women want to join, they're more than welcome. There's just none in Glasgow that seem to be very interested in watches.
There's a few signed up,
but these aren't the group of people that you need to give the hard sell to.
No.
And that's the thing. And I think, and I think brands are maybe starting to catch on to that a wee bit more now. That, when they go to these sort of meetups, they don't need to give that hard sell, or retailers don't need it, because these are the sort of people that are going to be honest with you. They're going to love it or hate it, sort of thing, and they're going to. If they're wanting to buy it, they'll buy it. You don't need to convince them to do that. They know what they're looking at, and I think that's the good thing about it, is that, it's very honest in that respect. But it's
well, I think in a previous episode you had said something about with one event where you ended up spending half an hour wearing one of the watches. Yeah. It was that thing where it's like, well, if you go into a retailer, you're not going to be they're not going to want you in there for half an hour wearing the watch. Exactly. And also, if you were, they're going to expect a constant conversation of questions and answers and all that. But actually, how on earth are you going to decide if you like a watch at all like that? Of course, if you buy anything online, you always have a return policy and stuff. But actually, no, you want to just put it on and feel. I mean, I'm loving this Grand Seiko that's on my wrist. I'm absolutely in love with it,
Brunswick.
But I've tried these on at events, and you've put it on and gone, oh, that feels lovely, and that's great.
But you've not got to wear it like that. You've not got to.
All those things where you forget about wearing it, seeing it going under the cuff, being paranoid not to mark your watch. But, it's that thing of putting it on, and you suddenly realise lots of things that you wouldn't notice. Yeah. And they either make you love it or they make you not like it. But that's fine. It's, it's about experiencing it.
I think, and like I says, I think that's a lot more brands are catching on to that idea, and they're doing a lot more direct to the client sort of events, And I think, with a lot of big brands pulling out of Basel, for instance, is possibly the start of it, because they realise they've got groups that they can go to, like Red Bar, like Hodinkee, that they know they're going to get featured in articles and on Instagram, that they don't need to spend millions of pounds to make these big lavish,
displays.
It's
stands,
crazy.
Yeah.
So it's almost like you're sort of seeing the market evolve in terms of the marketing of these products,
Yes.
And I think, coming up and seeing the guys and speaking to them face to face is far better than, a YouTube video or a Instagram post, you know what I mean?
Yeah.
And I think they'll go down really well. Yeah. I honestly do. I think that.
Well, for me, it's nice to hear people's feedback as well, because, like I said about the comments on Hodinkee, it's that thing of actually saying, look, if someone goes to me, I really don't like this or I like that. Yeah, that's interesting. When 10 people all say the same thing, then you start going, well, maybe I should consider that, or maybe or you go, no, I'm going to be pig-headed and I know best and I'm going to keep doing it. But you've got to. It's interesting to have that immediate feedback from people about things like, oh, I like it, but this would be interesting, or that would be interesting. And, I think that's the thing. I mean, obviously, I'm a very small watch company, so a bigger watch company can't necessarily do that.
Yeah.
So at this meet-up I went to last night, I ended up having a rather interesting conversation with someone who was talking about micro brands and what classifies as a micro brand. And it turned into a very lengthy conversation, which lots of people got involved in, as to what is a micro brand. And no one could decide what it was. Because the moment someone said, oh, well, it's to do a price, and then someone would say, yeah, but you'd call them a micro brand, and they wouldn't be, and yet they're both, in the price point. And then someone said, oh, it's the heritage, and said, yeah, but they've got heritage, they'd haven't, but they'd still class them both as a micro. It's a really interesting thing. I've just wondered from your perspective, like, it's a horrible phrase because it sounds like one of those catch-all hashtag trendy things.
I think it's a term that's been kind of thrown around any new kind of venture that seems that's based in watches or it's based in something like that. They've automatically been labelled as a micro brand, where I don't know what I'd class as a micro brand as. I think it's
in my eyes,
quantity,
I'd probably class it as a new company startup that's trying to pave a way, whether that's a Kickstarter campaign or because I don't necessarily think it needs to be in terms of they need to be making their own cases, or
No.
if they've got a brand and they're a small startup company, I would say they're a micro brand. But yeah, I think like you said, the names is thrown about quite a lot, and you're seeing a lot. It's a very crowded market.
Well, how many new watch companies started since this podcast started recording? I mean, I blink and it's like, another new British watch brand is launched.
Do you find that you're competing against these other brands, or do you even think of it in that way, in terms of you're trying to win customers pull them away from other brands, or you see it in terms of, I'm going to sell these regardless of how many others there are. Well, if people like them, they're going to buy them.
I think if we start from the basis that, I am a unique and beautiful snowflake, no one is possibly like me. No, it's a very interesting thing, because I think when I first started Fears, when I relaunched 2 years ago, and bear in mind it was 2 years before that when I was doing all the research, you draw up, who are my competitors? What do they make? What do they sell it for? What functions does it have? And very quickly I realised within the first year of running Fears that actually, no, that's not really quite true. And, going back to the store in London at the moment, in the second week the store was open, I held an evening called the British Watch Evening. And I invited Garrick, Pinion and Schofield watches to basically come in and for the day and the evening take over the store along with me. So we changed all the artwork so it was an equal reflection of our companies. Everyone had a section in the store. I took out all the Fears watches except for one display case, and they put in theirs. We then each invited our top, customers, owners, followers, friends, family, and put on an evening. Now, I had the space and I'm paying the lease on that, but I didn't charge them for it. I've got a drink sponsor, so I didn't have to charge them for the booze. Most they had to pay was their train ticket to come to London for the day and do that. We suddenly realised that we had the number of people we were inviting that was crossover on the guest list. And then people would arrive with one watch on each wrist going like, oh, well, this is a Garrick and this is a Pinion. And someone else would come going like, oh, I've got a Fears and I've got a Schofield. And you suddenly realise that a lot of these people, they're not buying these going, oh, shall I buy this Amigo or shall I buy this Fears? Yeah. And so suddenly you go, well, look, I'm sure some business, analyst would look at me and go, are you crazy? You literally are just offering your customers to these guys. And I'm going, yeah, but also going back to this thing of, I talk to these guys regularly. We do help each other out. I need a supplier for this. Do you have anyone you can recommend? There's all these sort of things where actually you help each other out. And by doing this, it's going, no, actually we are much stronger together, because what we're putting forward is the fact that we make watches because we love watches and we want to make beautiful watches. None of us have launched a watch purely on a commercial basis.
Yeah.
And actually, I feel like that's something that is stronger to have everyone in the room who's doing that, rather than me on my own going, look at me, I'm special and on my own. So, but then, you look at it and go, well, look, we share a lot of the same values, so therefore we're competitors. And then you go, well, hang on, no. Those three brands I was talking about, our watches all look completely different from each other's. So are we competitors?
Yeah.
I don't know. I don't think we're competitors. I mean, I think in an old-fashioned sense of business, we are competitors. But in 2018, everything is changing, and the watch industry is changing by the month. It is the most exciting time to be in the industry. I mean, earlier this year, AP announced to Reuters that within 3 to 5 years, they'll no longer have retailers. They're going to do everything direct. I mean, a brand like that saying something like that is shocking. And then I read on the train up today, they're putting out these concepts. They're basically going to have like townhouse boutiques in the major cities, but each one is going to be themed. So the one in London will be in a Georgian townhouse in Mayfair. The one in Hong Kong will be themed so it feels like a 5-star suite in a fancy hotel. The one in New York will feel like a loft in like the meatpacking district. They kind of theme them for each city, so they blend in. You're looking at that and going, 5 years ago, 2 years ago, would anyone have believed a company doing that? Yeah. The fact that, Omega sell watches online, MB&F are now doing a pre-owned. They now sell pre-owned watches alongside. Now, I know they're very high-end. They're, some would argue halterology or not, but like they're niche. But the fact is, they're selling new watches direct, and they're selling pre-owned watches alongside it. Again, no one was doing that a year ago. So at the moment, it's a very exciting time.
Is it JLC who've got their own, or is it Vacheron? They've got their own like vintage.
Vacheron, I believe. Yeah.
I think they're the only brand who sell like vintage, like they've either got like a boutique or they've got some. There's a. Because
they had that big sale 2-3 months ago. I think.
There's some link between their pre-owned section and their new stuff, but it's not. They still can't account for it. Like it's still a big part of their like business model. I'm sure.
Yeah.
I can't remember the details behind it, but I think they're a brand that are doing it.
But it's exciting times, and I don't know. Maybe it's because I graduated in 2008 as the recession hit and the whole world got turned upside down. Everything that I was taught at university and school in economics about, doing this, going into the city, working for a bank and all this, got turned upside down and sort of thrown in my face. I quite enjoy it when things are changing. I enjoy that sort of, Instagram has revolutionized things. The fact that I can have a conversation with anyone around the world, and also the fact is, if you're a collector the other side of the world and you have a question, you just send me a DM.
Yeah. No
emails, no. The office is open between 9 and 5, Monday to Friday. No, you just send a DM, and you appreciate the fact that I do a lot of the Fears Instagram. Sometimes I get people to help me out, but it's a case of you will get a direct answer, and you'll get an answer from the horse's mouth.
Yeah.
And I think that increasingly is the way things are going. People want that connection,
that relationship. Yeah. So I think a big thing with pretty much across all marketing is creating a experience which is not. It's tailored to like what it's more on a kind of one-to-one basis, or it's appearing as more as a one-to-one basis.
Yeah,
and that's what a lot of like big brands like. My mum works for Pernod Ricard, so they're putting a lot of work into creating like an experience that, even though they're doing this experience thousands of times for each customer, it seems like a kind of more personalised way of purchasing something, or a way of kind of buying something from that company. So I think a lot of marketing it's got that kind of that feel to it in terms of this is just for you, but it's marketed in a kind of weird way where it doesn't feel like that's been replicated. It's like so I think a lot of marketing on that type of stuff is going that kind of direction.
I mean, I I'm lucky that the company I run is small, and I think the watches are very fairly priced, but they're not cheap watches. I appreciate there's a lot of people who aren't able to necessarily buy them, and that does allow me to, I can have that personal interaction with people. If I was a company selling 10,000 watches a year, no, of course I couldn't do that, and it does water it down. But it's also a thing of, actually, when you own a company, you decide how you want it to grow and what you want to do. We've made 70 Brunswicks this year, and we've got, I think, 4 left of the final batch. And if I woke up tomorrow and looked on my phone and suddenly 4 people have bought them and they've all gone, the way it's all done, I can't then just go, okay, well, that's fine, we'll make another 20. Like, no, that's them done for the rest of 2018.
Yeah.
Now, there is a business side of you which goes, well, that's ridiculous. You mean your sort of, your best-selling watch, you then have nothing to sell and for several months. But actually, because it is a small company, I can afford that to be the case, while we then start the process of building more watches. Yeah. The same with things like packaging. Like earlier today, I travelled through Warrington, and that's where all the box and everything for the Brunswick's made. And each box is made out of English ash, which is stained in a bespoke colour, but they're all made by hand. So actually, when you look at each box, they're all unique because it's solid wood, it's not a veneer. So the grain is different on each box. Just like the enamel on the dial, it's slightly different on every single watch. I quite like that. I like the fact that, it's not just simply interchangeable. Actually, when it comes to the spare parts for the Brunswick, of which we've built up, we build up quite a healthy supply, because it's not like if you want a replacement glass, no one else makes that glass. Yeah. So we've made sure that we've got more than enough that if, for the next decades to come, that's quite an expensive business. But actually, when it comes to the main spare parts, we leave them unfinished. Because actually, if you have a watch that is, production built, and you need a new bezel, you open the packet, take out the polished bezel and put it on, and it'll fit. The thing with this is because each one's being finished by hand, that doesn't necessarily work. It's like if you had a coach-built car and it needed a new door. Well, there's no point having a standard door because it's not going to fit straight on. It needs to be refined to fit that exact bodywork. So the bezels, the case backs, things like that, we leave them unfinished so that if they need to be used in the future, and touch wood, that will be a long time from now, but if someone damaged the watch and needed a new bezel fitted, we'll then finish that bezel so that it will then fit that watch. Yeah. Rather than having one that doesn't have, because it's all about those lines. That goes back to the essence of the design. It's about getting that perfect curve. He's gone quiet again.
Yeah, I just absolutely love it. And I love the depth in the back of the case as well. How normally when you see these open case backs, it's just straight onto the movement. You've got that added depth in the back where you're looking down into it, and it's like it makes you want to look closer.
Yes, it's almost like a porthole.
Yeah, exactly.
It's almost like when you do that with your hand, you sort of look through and you focus in on something.
It's great.
Yeah. I think we're both kind of smitten by it, to be honest.
I can't wait to get it out in the natural daylight and get photos of it, because it's gonna really, really pop.
You were saying earlier about things with the design. There's a famous quote by Coco Chanel, which is always about when you're dressing in the morning, before you walk out of the door, look in the mirror and take one thing off. It's that thing of actually, to be truly elegant and stylish, you need to be slightly under. And I think it's actually, when you're designing a watch, whether it's the case, whether it's the dial, whatever it is, you kind of need to do the same. It's so easy when you're using your 25-inch monitor and you're zooming right in on everything. Oh, we could add this detail and we can add this. Of course you can. Modern technology allows us to add all kinds of details. But actually it's going, no. What I want to do is just stop. Mm-hmm. It's knowing when to stop and go, no, that's enough. Yeah. That's right.
Yeah, I think we're both kind of mesmerised by this, I think.
The most exciting thing is when you glance at your watch and it's bang on 12 o'clock and you're like, because they're both straight up over each other.
I love how your minute hand goes right the way to the edge. The point on the minute hand goes right the way to the edge of the chapter, and you get a very accurate reading.
Yeah.
It's
and also because it goes to a point, you can set it really accurate.
Yeah.
Okay, it's not a hacking seconds. You can always do that fun game with the trying to find the resistance.
No, I think I'm excited to see what people think tomorrow. Yeah, because I'm sure there'll be a lot of people there that, like me, haven't seen it yet.
Yeah,
and
it's annoying when you're primarily an online business, but it's because you rely on photographs and videos and things like that. But it's always nicer that actually, in the real life, it's better than the photos, because I think too often with beautiful photoshopping and rendering, you can make something that isn't
like
amazing.
You said. You got to know when to stop.
Yeah. There's something some of the other watch companies and I always have a rant about is the use of renderings rather than photographs. The fact that everything looks too perfect.
Yeah. I just think it looks great in the wrist. I mean, David's wearing it just now, and it's great. I'd love to have one. Add one to the collection.
Yeah, I think that's what I'm thinking as well.
I just got married. I have no money. No, it's great. Tomorrow's going to be a lot of fun. I'm very, very excited about the get together, and I think people are going to be equally as impressed with it as I am. I mean, like I said to you, I did not expect to like it as much as I did. I knew I was going to like it because I like the photos of it. I like everything I've seen. But
I'll show you the two vintage watches I mentioned earlier.
Yeah.
It's just got such a great profile. Put it next to your Tudor. Wow. Now the Black Bay looks big.
Yeah.
Okay, so this is from 1924. This is a sterling silver, and this is the inspiration for cushion, white dial, black numerals, blued hands. But hopefully you'll agree with me, there was no way I could reproduce that dial. I mean, I think it suits that watch. It's of that period. I mean, 1924, it's just outside the Edwardian period. Everything's still a bit Art Nouveau. I mean, Art Deco didn't officially come in until a year later in 1925.
Yeah, the numerals on the older one, I think they're acquired taste.
Yes. I mean, they would make a beautiful mantle clock.
Yeah.
Something nice and classic in a sort of faux mahogany finish. Oh, it'd be beautiful.
They definitely, on that one, because obviously it's smaller as well, they definitely kind of overwhelm the kind of space in the dial. I think with these, or with the modern one at least anyway, they've got each kind of numeral's got kind of room to breathe in its own little space, like in terms of the kind of font size and just kind of the dial layout, I think.
Well, here is where the numerals, the logo and the hands all come from 1946.
Oh, that's that.
Now, the interesting thing is, to create the numerals for the Brunswick, I basically did a high-resolution scan of that watch dial. I then put it onto Illustrator to trace out the numerals, and I started by just doing a raw trace. So I just literally traced out what I saw. Yeah. I then realised that every single one on that dial is completely different. So even on the 11, they don't match. They're completely different. Yeah. And it was then a case of going, right, okay, I'm not just going to recreate this directly because that will look a bit, it just wouldn't look right. So then you do a refinement. But I still remember that 1946 watch. I bought that on eBay in beginning of 2015. So quite a while before Fears restarted. I paid £5 for it.
That's ridiculous.
Because no one knew what the company was. It didn't exist. They go for a lot more than that nowadays. But I remember getting that watch, and I was in the post office, and I ripped open the bag and got it out of the parcel, and I loved it. And I was just like, it was that moment of going, okay, now I've found something I can, you know, as a basis. Because until then, a lot of the watches, they were okay, but they didn't excite me in the same way. They were like, they're nice, but when I saw that, I was like, I love this. I absolutely love this. This is ticking so many happy boxes in my head where I'm going, I just like, you know, the proportions. So the proportions of that watch are, the silhouette of that is the same as the Redcliffe.
Right.
Okay.
They're beautiful.
Yeah. So even on this one, like the gold, it is gold, like numerals, like, or is that aged,
so the numerals they were like a luminescent material.
Oh, okay.
But I think if you look close, they're kind of picked out with a bit of gilt.
Yeah.
The hands are
I think
blued
that
on
works with like it's obviously it's like a brushed silvery dial with the kind of gold on the near, which looks amazing.
It's nice to see the non-skeletonized hands next to the new modern.
Oh, don't worry, we'll do that on yours.
No. I prefer it's nice to see it, to see the, you know, the differences. I much prefer the skeletonized.
So they are the 1946 centenary collection. So the watch you're holding, if my memory serves me right, I think it's the one on the far right on the middle row.
Yeah.
It's got different lugs, but it's the same.
I presume the pricing's changed a little bit.
Interestingly, actually, when you convert the average of those pounds, shilling, and pences into modern money, they work out between £500 and £800.
Yeah.
Which also determined at the beginning that the Redcliffe would be £650 because it fits within that sort of thing. Of course, back then, you know, you could make mechanical watches and import movements for a lot less than it costs to do that today. But
beautiful. Oh, I see what you mean. FWC limited on the buckle.
Yeah. These aren't the originals, but I was telling you about the. That was the first sketch. That was the one that determined everything from there.
So it was almost like it is like a seamless, just curve up and curve down. You've only got a little, probably just the way the light's reflecting with a little notch of the edge of the crystal. And
that notch, basically, because of the way it screws down, and you've got a Heitel ring holding the crystal in place, because we realised there was going to be that very, very slight, almost like a gap, the crystal manufacturer, they put a bevel on it.
Yeah.
And when it catches the light, so occasionally you'll tilt the wrist, the sun will hit it, and you'll get a prism, and you'll suddenly get all the colours of the rainbow.
Because you kind of see...
You'll quite like this one.
You kind of see it around, like when the light's here, you get the little, like ray.
It kind of refracts it, doesn't it? It distorts what you're seeing through it.
That's really cool.
What I quite like is they put many coats on the inside of anti-reflective, which means that actually the only way you can really tell how big the crystal is when you look at it purely from the edge. Because when you look at it, even at a slight tilt, all you see is the glass flange. You don't actually see the rest of it. Yeah, so that's just some of the.
These are the original concept
these were some
designs.
these were some of them. There were a lot, and I'd say these are the ones which look most distinctive of there. But also on these, I played around with the minute track as well. So some of them have just dashes, some have little triangles.
You like the train track ones as well.
Yeah.
I think it's the choices.
It's nice seeing the progression as well.
I think actually, if my memory serves me right, that probably was one of the first ones. But that was playing around with sector, because I quite like that sort of.
Yeah. I like
that one. I quite like
bottom left. I like the way you've incorporated the chapter ring into the subdial.
Yeah,
it works really well.
Yeah, that was. This one actually was more thinking along the design lines of the Redcliffe. The Redcliffe's got a few of those things where things integrate quite neatly and things play around. But yeah, I mean, this is the wonderful thing. Is like when I did the Brunswick, I at least worked out the basic proportions. The first dial concepts I did of the Redcliffe would make beautiful like wall clocks. Because actually, when you printed them out 1-1, they were just ridiculous. You have to kind of overdo the size of the numerals because you forget how small it is.
Yeah.
On a clock, it's completely different proportions.
I just keep going back to looking at it.
Same.
Even though you're wearing that on the wrist, I think it's just size great.
Yeah.
I don't think it'll be very long before you sell out of all of them.
Especially after tomorrow.
Yeah. You'll probably find that you might be out of them by the weekend. No, I'm very, very impressed. And how long did it take you to, would you say it took from like the first initial concept to the actual product being ready?
So, usually prototyping a new watch is years. The first conversations about that watch were actually had on the day I launched. A gentleman came up to me and said, "Oh, you should be doing this." And I said, "Yes, of course I should. I can't do that, you know." And he said, "Don't worry, I'll make some introductions." And then we met up for cups of tea, which turned into pots of tea, and over several months had lots of conversation about it. But actually, his introductions came good. You know, he introduced me to the firms I needed to meet to make this happen. Those sketches, that sketch, I haven't actually got it on the copy, but in the book, because I always date my sketches, I think it's the 16th of June. Well, the watch launched on the 2nd of November.
Right.
And we got it a few days before then. So basically we got it done, half of June, July, August, September, October, 4.5 months from literally a pencil sketch to a prototype that was 98%.
Yeah.
But this was the thing I was very grateful, because in the workshop, as we were getting through to the final weeks, they were basically working 7 days.
Yeah.
They were working, not pulling all-nighters, because that's not quite how it works in watchmaking. But, effectively this became we're going to get this ready for Fears. Yeah. Because I think it was a thing that not only did the watchmaker personally like it, he really liked the design of it, but also I think because through the whole way, I'd gone up to visit them, I'd been talking about it, I'd been showing them, for me, every supplier I work with is also a family-run business.
Yeah.
So there is that connection of, I'm the great-great-great-grandson of the founder. Oh, you're the great-grandson of the founder. You automatically have that connection. And it means that often I find that they're more... minimum orders suddenly go down a little bit, which is very beneficial, especially when you haven't got huge backing. But also it's that sort of shared interest. For me, I pride myself on paying every single invoice way before the due date. Yeah. Because they're a small business as well. It's that sort of, if you're going to ask someone to pull all-nighters and work hard for you, the least you can do is make sure they're paid. I think it's a modern way of doing business. It's saying, actually, I don't buy into this whole, screwing people over. I mean, it's not ethical, but also it's just not good business. But I think that, the prototype was probably one of the quickest, not quickest, but I think it was because it was so much focus. And I think this is the thing, that year at Salon QP, so last year in November, I launched a new dial colour of the Redcliffe Date, but that was a new colour that had already been developed. I launched the Redcliffe Continental, which bizarrely took longer to develop than the Brunswick, because the Continental uses quite a rare quartz GMT movement.
Okay.
In fact, it's the only watch on the market today which uses that movement. And then there was this, and this wasn't designed to be the main production watch. It wasn't designed to go into the brochure as, it was basically 14 watches as a one-off project. 14 because Fears was at number 14 Brunswick Square. So it was just basically a sort of homage to the past, and we'll just do this. And I thought it would take a year for those 14 to sell, and they sold out in 4 weeks. And I was like, well, that's nice. But then it was the fact that people kept still asking for it. And it was like, oh, okay, maybe I ought to keep making these. So we did another batch of 14, and they sold out. And I was like, right, okay. So then the third batch, I was like, right, I'm going to do a double batch, 28 watches. And then they sold out. And it was just like, right. So it's been quite a struggle to get to the point where we actually have watches in stock rather than saying, you're going to have to wait 4 months.
Yeah.
At one point, the waiting list was up to about 4 or 5 months.
Right.
And it was a case of people saying, well, how quickly can I get a watch? And it's like, it's literally going to be 5 months.
Yeah.
I can't do it any quicker.
No, but it's they're good problems to have.
They're good. Exactly. They're good problems. I mean, so this is going back to one of your very first questions about, when I was starting, what was the biggest problem or the biggest issue I had? The problems I have today are about things like, oh, someone needs this watch, I need to get DHL to get it shipped off there, we've got to get the paperwork sorted. You're like, it's too often I'll forget the thing of going, I should just stop and go, actually, it's really nice that someone's been buying my watch, because you focus on all the nitty-gritty of running a business. But actually, I like doing both sides of it. Design the watch, doing the pencil sketchings, through to doing the VAT return and, doing the bookkeeping and doing all that. But at least it means you kind of keep an eye on every aspect of it.
And are people, so your next release, are people currently aware that that's coming, or...
So some people are. So it's not favoritism, but it's a case of, people who have been following Fears for a long time. I've got to know them well. It's a case of saying, look, if you're going to come along to the store, we'll go for a drink. Let me just show you something special. So I mean, out of the 4 of those gold ones, of the first ones, 2 have already sold. The third has a deposit on it. So it's bizarrely going to be a watch I'm launching where I don't actually have any of them left. But it's a case of saying, actually, I'm a small company. I can't afford to build 100 of them and hope that people will like them. You do a small thing and go, do people like them? And people are reacting very well. Like you see the colour and you go, this is something different. This is, so you go, okay, fine. In 2019, we'll actually do a proper run of, 10 or 20. But again, they can't be made in bigger numbers. There's just not the capacity to do that. So, Fears by its very nature will always be a small company.
And you'll, in doing that as well, you create demand. A lot of brands are doing it now, across the board, not even within watches, but take Rolex for example, holding back stock. If they wanted to, they could fulfill every order of everyone that wants a Rolex probably twice over, but they choose not to because they want to create demand. But naturally, as a small company, you're not doing it intentionally to screw people over. You can't, but it creates demand. It creates people wanting more. So again, it's good problems to have.
It's good problems. It's good problems. This is the biggest change I've had in the last, say, 6 to 8 months. Is Fears used to be much more domestic business. Now it's completely international. So, before I'm going to bed, I'm replying to emails from people in Australia. The first thing I'm doing in the morning is replying to emails. No, the other way around. Nighttime, it's America, and in the morning, it's Singapore, Australia, Japan, Australia. It's that weird thing where actually the business is now running on a much more 24-hour basis, because no longer is it just people in the UK or in Western Europe. And that's quite a big change, actually, because it takes its toll physically. I know I'm running this pop-up at the moment in London, but I'm on day 45 in a row. After a while, it's like, how many Red Bulls can you drink to keep going? But it is that thing where actually I can't go to bed if someone's sent an email through and they're on a different time zone. I know what it's like when you send an email into the ether to a company you've never heard from. It's like, you want to get that reply, even if it's just say, thank you, I'll be honest, it's like midnight here, I'm going to come back to you tomorrow morning with a proper detailed reply. It's that thing of contact. When I years ago when I was in PR, I had a really good manager, and she always taught me that no email should ever be in your inbox for more than 24 hours without something being done to it. Whether that's you've been CC'd in, you just need to delete it, or you need to reply to it, or you would need to acknowledge it. Now, the acknowledgement thing sounds ridiculous because you're creating more work. You're just sending an email back saying, thank you for this, I'm going to get on this tomorrow. But it means that person then can be like, okay, that's fine, they're on it. Rather than the constants. And for me, I've always got that. If someone sends a message, I want to go back to them, because actually, while it's in their thought, while it's in their mind, I'd rather start a conversation, because that then leads on to questions and things that they hadn't thought of asking, rather than it being right, I'll get back to you in a couple of days with one question. I'm amazed that companies still operate like that.
Yeah, no, absolutely. And I think, with the way that you're running it, with the way the business is going, I think it's going to be a very promising future for Fears. And it's good, meeting you. We go back to the whole Instagram thing. We wouldn't be having this conversation now if it wasn't for that.
That's it. We literally wouldn't.
It's crazy, but I can see you doing very well if you keep creating the products like you are. I think the finishing, the qualities, it's competing with the big boys. I don't know why people would have a reason not to want it. Like you said, it's different. I've certainly not seen anything like it. So I think you will do very, very well.
Thank you.
And I think it's a positive future for Fears.
Definitely.
It's great that you've brought a company back, that did close. How often does that happen? What a story to tell.
Well, I think there are older watch companies, there are other watch companies that have been brought back from the dead. Except for Vertex watches, I don't think any others are by someone who is a relative of the founder, within the same family. And I think it's like I said earlier, the fact that he and I go for lunch, it's because actually we're quite unique. Because, when we're making decisions, whether that decision is, should I put up this Instagram post or not, or developing a whole new line of watches, however much you go, it's our company, it is our family's companies. I own 100% of Fears, but I'm in regular contact with a lot of family who have Fear as their surname. So I came down on my grandmother's side, which is why I don't have Fear as my surname. But you're suddenly saying, well, actually for them, it's actually got their name on the dial. So, you have that knowledge that you can't screw it up. And that does make you take things not necessarily more cautiously, but you just go through it from a different angle. Whereas, if you just buy the trademark and that's a completely different thing. You're going to do it in a more turbocharged way, potentially.
You've got the personal connection, to not want it to fail because of that family name. It's it must be quite a proud feeling, to
to see that product not only create a product, but a product that's got that family name on it. It's
some sort of lineage to people, like a lineage to your great grandfather, who's like elements of decisions that he chose, or decisions that he faced when he was created, the ones in the 20s, or for the centenary ones in the 40s. Like, you're going through the same process that he went through. I think that's a really cool.
Well, I quite like the fact that Edwin Fears started it at 22. His son took over when he was 21. I restarted Fears just in my 20s, when I was 29, which is why if you look at any of the press photography for the Red Cliffs, they're always set to the 29th.
Mm-hmm.
Not only because I was 29 when I restarted it, but also because my first day I worked full-time on Fears was the leap year, the 29th of February 2016.
Yeah.
And for me, it's that kind of going, actually, that was the biggest step I'd ever... It was the first day of not having a salary.
It's meant to be.
But no, it's... it's kind of thinking of what they did in the past and going, right, you know what, actually, I don't just think about the next 5 years. You know, in my business plan, I mean, a business plan changes all the time, but a business plan, I've written down my 5 year, what I want to achieve, 25 and 50. And you go 50 years time, I mean, I'll be in my 80s.
Yeah.
But actually, it's a case of going, well, there are certain decisions you make today affect that in the future.
Mm-hmm.
So you need to be thinking about that now.
Yeah. Absolutely. But I think that's probably a pretty good place to call it a night.
I have no idea what the time is, because I'm wearing your watch, and every watch is set differently.
It's 5 to 12.
It was great to have you up and have you on. I think it'll be great to have you up in the future as well.
I'd love that.
And see as it progresses, and
come down.
Next,
come down and see your workspace, and see how it's all done, put together. It's great how we've been able to create these relationships through the medium that we're all using now, and it's great that we're going to have all the guys there tomorrow, all these new sort of faces that you probably have never had any contact with, maybe a DM every now and then, but it's exciting.
Definitely.
I always find it fascinating questions people ask, because at first people will start like not being intimidated, but they're like, they don't want to ask any probing questions or anything. Sort of. Then suddenly someone will go like, so why exactly have you made this like this, like this? And there'll be a really probing sort of, and then you're able to give an answer because the buck stops with me, so I'll know the answer. And then suddenly the floodgates open, the Pandora box is open, and the questions come. But I love it because actually, there is a reason behind everything, and it's nice to be able to talk that through.
Absolutely. I think we'll call it a night there.
Yeah.
Thank you very much, Nicholas, for coming on, and
thank you for having me.
Yeah, we look forward to having you on again.
To the next one.
Cheers.
Thank you.